Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Charles Derrick.
This is J Rob.
And this is Bringing the Noise. So me and J-Rob have not had a show in a while together. I done a show between the last time me and him did a show. And so it's been a couple of months or so.
Yeah.
And so we got to get our sea legs back together. And man, are we starting off with a really big deal coming back together.
Sir.
This is a special treat, y'all. This is unbelievable. This is a living legend's daughter. And she is a very accredited singer and is in the country music fabric of pop culture herself. And this is huge. This is huge to sit down. We got the pleasure of meeting Joni Lee at our show in Kentucky last weekend. When she first walked up, we got done with the show. And when she first walked up, it was like, she introduced herself to us. And I'm so glad she did. And she said, I usually don't do this. And she introduced herself, and our eyes just got, oh my gosh, like, hold on a minute. Yeah. Like, hold on, say that again. Like, really? Like, here, just random at a casino resort, in Kentucky. Like, what are you, it was huge. It led to getting to know the person, Joni Lee. We talked for a while after the show. I think even the people that was wanting to that helped escort us out, I think they were kind of like, all right, guys, and we're like, dude, we're talking to Conway's daughter over here.
Give us a sec.
Yeah. So we were, that's what gave the wow factor at first. But after we started talking to her, and I told Joni this on the phone, after we started talking to her, it was more about Joni and the kind of person that she was and how much interest we all shared with, classic country music. And not just that, but the kind of person that she is. So much like us, so much like us today and the way we are as family people today. And really that good old boy, good old folks kind of person. We all kind of gravitated toward her. So it went from Conway's daughter and the wow factor there to tell us about you. Tell us your thoughts on things. Tell us, what do you like? What do you, whatever. So this is going to be really, really good, y'all. I know a lot of people probably watching this are, just like us, the wow factor about Conway Twitty and about, wanting to know a lot about that. And I'm sure we're going to go there a lot. But I think as the can opens, you're going to be wanting to know a lot about Joni because she is an awesome person. And it's going to be interesting to hear her tales and then even her thoughts on her daddy too, So I'm sure everybody knows the accolades, right? I mean, Conway Twitty, he had #1 records in 5 different decades, y'all. That is unheard of. And he had 55 #1 singles, more than 50 million records sold, more than 100 major awards, Now we will get into it later. But that when I say 100 major awards, that's great and grand. But there's also some interesting shunning that happened with the Country Music Association, and we'll go there. So we know Conway in one of the greatest of all time in country music, no doubt. Let's just go there, the Elvis Presley of country music, right?
Sure.
But Joni herself, like I said, it started in 1975, 74, when the recording of Don't Cry, Joni happened with her daddy. And it was just, we'll go into all the details about that. I don't want to unwrap that just yet, but Joni got her career started at that point, with her dad. And there was I'm not going to open that can either. She is married to John Wesley Riles. He is known for being a professional studio background singer, but he also had his hits of Once in a Lifetime Thing, Kay, Liberated Woman, Easy, and Fool. But he also was, like I said, a background session guy, background singer, session recording artist with Alan Jackson, and I believe Brooks and Dunn, if I'm not mistaken. Who was it? Everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Name it.
80s and 90s, a lot of the songs by heart. He's in a lot of those, right? Yeah. So she had a daughter, Christy, a son, John, and a stepdaughter, Jamie, and a grandchild from that stepdaughter named Jaden. I'm not going to say when Joni was born. I'm not going to go there because we have a lady on the show. But Helena, Arkansas is where she hails from. Y'all, Joni Lee Riles, or what would ring your bell, Twitty, is on the show tonight.
Here's a song that I recorded back a couple of years ago, and it went on to become one of the biggest records I've ever had. And this is the young lady that helped make it possible. Here she is, my daughter, Joni Lee.
Joni, please say you'll wait for me. I'll grow up someday, you'll see. Saving all my kisses just for you. Signed with love forever true.
Joni was the girl who lived next door. I've known her, I guess, 10 years or more. Joni wrote me a note one day, and this is what she had to say.
Jimmy, please say you'll wait for me. I'll grow up someday, you'll see. Saving all my kisses just for you. Signed with love forever true.
Slowly I read her note once more. I went over to the house next door. Her teardrops fell like rain that day when I told Joni what I had to say. Joni, Joni, please don't cry. You'll forget me by and by. You're just 15, I'm 22. And Joni, I just can't wait for you. Soon I left our little hometown, Got me a job and tried to settle down, but these words kept haunting my memory. The words that Joni said to me.
Jimmy, please say you'll wait for me. I'll grow up someday, you'll see. Saving all my kisses just for you. Signed with love forever true.
We're excited. How you doing?
Thank y'all so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you guys. And, you know, I had the pleasure of hearing you all in the casino. I was there to play the machines, but I didn't know I was going to get the treat of hearing you guys. I was back in the back and I could hear your version of Slow Hand. And I thought, oh, wow, they're doing Dad's version. And then I moved a little closer to the stage. I heard Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man. That was exciting. And then I was sitting right across from the stage playing my machine. And I heard you say something about it. And I love a lady wearing tight fitting jeans. And I thought, here we go. And I looked up on the screen and there's my daddy, bigger than life up there, which, you know, anytime I get to see him, it warms my heart. But the fact that you all were honoring him, I cannot tell you as his child how much that means, because, you know, music has moved on and it's a whole different sound today. And he's not going to be played on traditional radio, but I guarantee you turn on a good old country station that plays great country music and you'll hear him all the time.
All day
so,
long.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I like I said, I normally don't go up and, you know, I don't want to feel like I'm boasting or bragging. I mean, that's not my nature. But I thought, well, I want to at least go up and thank them, you know, for paying tribute to Dad and keeping his music alive in the next generation, which you all are, and just say thank you. And so when I went up to Charles, I was kind of like blushing. I could feel myself blushing. And you know, I said, well, I want to introduce myself. My name is Joni Twitty. And he said, wow, well, you have a famous last name anyway. And it cracked me up. And I said, well, actually.
Oh, as soon as you
I'm
even said
daughter.
actually, my eyes then started getting big. Like, this is not, yeah.
I don't think you shut your mouth the rest of the time. You were like,
Yeah.
And that warmed my heart that you were so touched, you know, to meet my dad's daughter, you know, because I'm very proud of him. I'm very proud of what all he accomplished. And, you know, I'm out there tooting his horn constantly as far as in a professional way with the record label and licensing and things like that. I run our business, which is called Conway Twitty United, and it's owned, you know, by my 3 siblings and myself. So it's a real honor when you get to go out and there he is, you know, be on this huge Megatron, you know, screen up there, and he was singing, and I thought, oh, my heart just started pounding it, you know, every time I see him. I just, you know, I don't watch him all the time because sometimes it's really hard. Every once in a while, I'll put on Rainy Night in Georgia, you know, with him and Sam Moore. And that was his last recording that he did right before he left town. And, you know, it took me years before I could watch it because it was, I just dropped to my knees, you know, and fall apart. And I thought, it's not supposed to be painful. It's supposed to be enjoyed. So I finally got to where I can do it. And every once in a while, my husband will be over there on his computer and he'll put it on. And I start out doing really good. And I'm so excited. And then I just, you know, I fall apart. I still miss him every day. Every day. There's not a day that goes by I don't think about him. And you know, wish he was still here giving us some great music.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, I remember when he passed, I remember where and I don't remember good. And J-Rob will tell you, my memory's horrible. But I remember where I was on and listening to the radio when I heard that he had passed. I was coming back. My dad owned a pawn shop, and we were coming back from that pawn shop, and we were listening on the radio, and they said Conway had died. We were like, I was like, what was wrong with Conway Twitty? Like, there's nothing wrong with him, you know?
No. No.
It was shocking. It was like when Dale Earnhardt died. I mean, it was like, what? I mean, you know, like the big guy died. Like, oh my gosh, you know.
I know. You know, he was one of the healthiest people you could ever meet. He exercised, he ate right, he never drank a drop in his life, he never took drugs in his life, he never had to take medication other than he got to where he took like a half of a blood pressure pill a day. But he was the healthiest person. And I remember right before he had just finished the Rainy Night in Georgia recording, and he was getting ready to leave for a 3-week tour. And I went out to his house and rang the doorbell, and he came walking to the door. And, you know, it was the last time I got to see him where he could respond to me. And they were gone for 3 weeks, and he was supposed to be in Nashville when, you know, all this happened. And Loretta Lynn's husband, Mooney, was in the hospital. He had had serious heart issues. And Loretta was in the hospital with Mooney in Springfield, Missouri. And so Dad said, well, I'll fill in the date for her. So he went to Branson, did a show, an afternoon show. They got on the bus after the show was over, and it was about 6 o'clock in the evening, and they pulled up to a truck stop, and they were going to fuel the bus, come back to Nashville for fanfare. You know, that's what they called it back then. Now it's called CMA Fest. But back then it was, you know, fanfare. And so he had big plans. We lived there at Twitty City, and all the fans would come and see us. And so it was just going to be an exciting week for everyone. And all of a sudden, the band was in the restaurant. They were getting some food, and Dad was getting ready to go in. And he hit his knees in pain. And he was really, really in severe pain. They said his hair was just drenched, you know, from so much pain. And they got on the walkie-talkies and said, call 911, so that, you know, they didn't have cell phones back then in the buses and stuff. So they were able to call 911. And when the paramedics got there, his blood pressure was like 40/0, which is, you know, very low. And they rushed him, and it was a trauma center, you know, which is really surprising to me now, especially because they should have been looking for an aneurysm, and they didn't even look. They left him there for 2.5 hours. And, you know, we weren't there, but we got the call finally, you know, that he was in the hospital. And so I thought, well, he's going to be okay. Because at first they were saying it's a kidney stone, you know, and kidney stones aren't that abnormal, or they're not life-threatening. So I didn't think too much about it. And about 30 minutes later, they called me back, and they said, he has an aortic aneurysm and it ruptured. And I had gone into nursing for a little while. That's where my career path was going to go. And then I was interrupted by the building of Twitty City. So I kind of dropped that, but I learned enough about it. I knew that was very serious. So I called my brother, Jimmy. Mike, we couldn't get in touch with, my oldest brother. We couldn't get him. He was doing a show down at, you know, Fanfare in Nashville for like preliminary shows and stuff. So we couldn't get him, but we were leaving him voicemail after voicemail. We got on the phone, started trying to call, you know, to get a flight. And of course, there's nothing to Springfield, Missouri at 9 o'clock at night, or 9:30 by that time. And so we said, we're going to have to drive. And we started throwing things together. My sister was in Oklahoma. And so she said, I'm leaving right now. My mom hired a driver for her, you know, so she wouldn't be driving by herself through the night. And so Jimmy and his wife and I got in the car, and we cut out the gates of Twitty City about midnight, by the time we got everything figured out and, you know, on our way. And we made a 9-hour trip in 5.5 hours. And I guarantee we had angel wings that were wrapped around our vehicle, because Jimmy had the needle of the car, you know, buried. I mean, back then they had the little thing, you know, with the car that told you your speed, and it was buried. We never went under what the max speed was. And these were not like interstates all the way or anything like that. This was little country road up to Branson after a certain point. So we got to the hospital about 5:30 in the morning, and Dad wasn't awake. He was laying there, with a ventilator, and the nurse said, well, he should wake up around noon. And I thought, okay, that's great. I didn't know. And I guess about 8:00, something like that, somewhere around there. It was a little before that, so about 7:30. I went down to get some coffee because I had a migraine headache from, crying all the way and the stress of everything. So I went and got a cup of coffee, and all the band and the road crew were sitting in this waiting area. And I was talking to them, and my sister, Kathy, comes running down the hall, and she said, Joni, Dad's heart stopped. And I said, oh my God. I dropped my coffee and I started running toward the ICU room, and they said, they won't let you in. They're working on him. You can't go in. And of course, then the reality was hitting, and we waited in they moved us to a little tiny ICU area that was just for family, and it had all the band in there and road crew. And my sibling, Michael, had gotten there by this time, Reba McIntyre, about it, and she lent Mike her plane and said, you get there, you need to get to your daddy. So anyway, we were sitting in the middle waiting, and then the doctor walks in, and he said, I'm sorry, I've done everything I can. And I just remember, sliding down the wall and falling into my dad's piano player. Mike Shrimp was his name, he's still here, but anyway, slid into his arms and just fell apart, and so our whole world changed. It was just unbelievable, because the person out of everybody you could ever meet in your life, you'd say, well, that guy's going to live to be 100 because he's so healthy and he took such good care of himself, and you just never could have seen that coming. And it was a total shock and a devastation to our family and all the people around him.
When did Loretta come in? She was there. She was at that hospital.
She did. She went down to see him right before he went into surgery. We got there after they took him to surgery. So by the time he came out is when we got there. But Loretta was called up. She was upstairs in the same hospital with Mooney.
Yeah.
Mooney, like M-O-N-N.
Gotcha. M-O, okay.
Yeah, Mooney. But she was upstairs, and they called her, and she came down.
How ironic is that? Like, that's crazy.
I know. They spent, much of their career together.
Oh, yeah. They're a legend couple, kind of,
Diamond duet. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what they called them. So anyway, it was just real special that she was there with us. And then they called her back, after he was gone. And they gave, Kathy and Mike and Jimmy and I the time alone with him first. And then Loretta came, and she, tried to comfort us. And of course, there's not a lot of things you can say when something like that happens, but just to have her hold us, made it special, it made it special for us. And she'll always have a warm place in our hearts. And, talk to her and her kids and our granddaughter, all our grandkids and stuff. So it's really neat that we've remained close all these years. And she, Dad, and he adored her. They were best of friends. And Mooney said, he's the only guy in the music business that I like. So Mooney, a lot of rumors went around going, oh, Conway and Loretta are married. And she heard that one time, and she said, yeah, we're married. She'd say anything. She was on stage. She said, everybody says we're married. He's married to Mickey, and I'm married to Mooney. So you just never knew what was going to come out of Loretta's mouth. Still don't. She's quite a character. But that's why you love her so much. She's so endearing. But anyway, it was special that she was there that day.
That is just, that's crazy. Ironic. I was reading that. And so y'all just gave several years ago, a special tribute at Loretta's ranch, that painting of Conway that was painted by Ronnie McDowell.
That's right. Yeah. Ronnie called me one day, and, he used to open a lot of shows for Dad during a certain part of his career. And he called me one day and he said, I'm an artist. And I said, yeah, I've heard you're an artist. I heard you're really good. He said, I have wanted to do a portrait of your dad for a long time, but I was so emotionally attached to him. It was just very difficult for me to go there. And he said, I finally thought about it and thought, you're ready to do this. So he did the coolest painting. It's on our website. We have a website called conwaytwitty.com, and they sell them on there, the prints from it. But it's a picture of Dad as himself, probably in the 80s. I think it was, in the early 80s. And he's looking in a mirror and he sees himself as the rock and roll guy. But it's just the
younger
coolest
version.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, younger version. Exactly. So Ronnie was having a dedication of this, and he invited us all to be there. And he gave us the portrait, in a frame. And we just were so touched that meant so much to him, Dad's life and the influence he had on him. And, Dad was so good about helping people. He would help artists by saying, I found this song, because he would listen to thousands of songs, album. He would sit with that little tape recorder, cassette tape recorder, and everybody would send him all these songs, and he would go through every one of them. And he may not listen to 30 seconds of one if it really wasn't good. But if he heard something that he thought would be not right for him, but great for another artist, he'd call him up, said, I found this song for you. And Ronnie McDowell was one of those people. And he said, I got this great song for you. And it's called Happy Birthday, Darling. And Ronnie said, oh, Conway, I just don't hear it. So Dad said, well, then I'm going to record it. And he did. And it was a #1 record.
Wow.
Ronnie said, Lord, did I mess up? But yeah, he was so good about doing things like that, finding songs and calling the artist and saying, I found a great song for you. And they may or may not have recorded it. So, and I tell you another song, the Lee Greenwood song that gave him his career was Turns Me Inside Out. And he had put it out on MCA Records back then. And they weren't promoting it. They weren't doing anything for it. And Dad said, well, it's a hit. And he called the label. He said, it's a hit. If y'all aren't going to push this boy's recording, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to record it. I'm going to show you it's a hit. So that got their fire lit under him, and they started playing his version. And he had this huge career after that. So Dad kind of helped him get his start. And another one he helped was Trisha Yearwood. She was just a background, not a background, a demo singer around Nashville. Different people, write songs, and she would go in and do the demo for him. And the labels kept passing on her and passing on her. He said, he called MCA again. He said, you guys are crazy. This girl's a great singer. And so they finally went again to see her showcase, and she got her deal. So, he just was very helpful in situations like that. Those are just a few examples of the kind of things he did.
Well, the thing about that song, that's beautiful that he'd be willing to hear a good song to give to an artist. But when it, with me hearing that, like, all right, here's a good song. If you're not going to record it, I'm going to, and show you this song's a hit. Well, to me, he could have read the phone book and turned it into a hit. He didn't really have the song.
I say that too, but really the song is it. He gave all the praise to the songwriters. He said, I'm just an instrument to deliver this message. And he never took the credit as a singer. He always said it's the song that sings. And I'm just the fortunate one that gets to do that. And he just put songwriters, on the pedestals. admired them so much and their gifts and their talents and the fact that it would come from deep in their souls, you know. And of course, he wrote, and a lot of people don't realize this, but he wrote 19 #1 records.
Well, I kept up with a little bit of that. See, this has been a special deal with you introducing yourself, and you know, in the back to the start, you know, the pleasure's all ours for you joining us on here. This is wonderful you doing this, but like my mother, I think I mentioned to you, was a huge Conway fan. And it was actually my first concert I ever went to was to see your dad at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis.
Oh, wow. That was a good one. Yeah.
I've been digging on some Conway since real little.
Well, yeah. And you know, he was born just about 70 miles from there in Fires Point, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then he was raised in Helena.
Yeah.
And my mom and dad met in Helena. She was from Marianna, Arkansas.
Okay.
But she went to beauty school in Helena when she was 17. And that's when she met my dad. He saw this girl walking down the street with this little white uniform on. And he said, "Oh man, she's a cute little thing." And he was so shy. He would drive up down the road, and every time she would like look over there at him, because, you know, he kept going by her, he'd turn his head and put his head up like this, because he didn't want her to know he was looking at her, you know. Wow. And finally they ended up meeting up. He was playing at the Delta Supper Club in Helena, and my mom and some friends came out. They said, go with us. And she said, "I don't fit in places like that, but I'll go just to have fun with you guys." So she went, and he looked up. He was on the bandstand, you know, playing. And he looked out across the room and he saw her, and he said, "Oh my gosh," because he'd been looking for her. He'd been going into every restaurant, every doctor's office, dentist office, trying to find this girl in the little white uniform. And he didn't think about the beauty school, you know. Yeah. But he went all over town trying to find her. And then she comes that night, you know, when he's playing. And he said he looked out there and he saw her. He said, "It just took my breath away." He said, I put my guitar down and I looked at the band and said, "Boys, play something slow." And he went over there and he said, "Hi, my name's Harold, and I'd like to ask you to dance." And she said, "My name's Mick." So he took her hand and they danced, and that was the first of their love story.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I've got a ton of questions, and I'm sitting here just like, okay, where's important? And I think it's going to be good if we can go back now. I'd like to know you and your sister and your two brothers, your earliest recollection and y'all's childhood. I mean, was Michael around? I mean, because he, you know, different mother and stuff. I mean,
no, he was raised by my grandparents. My dad's mom and dad raised Michael. Okay. And and he lived in Mississippi and grew up in Helena first, and then they moved back to Mississippi. But Jimmy and Kathy and I were all my mom's three children. Correct. I was the oldest, then Kathy, then Jimmy. And I remember, well, let me just say, I don't remember, but, you know, Dad got a offer from a guy that he had met over in the military. If you ever decide because he decided when he was in the Army, he played baseball, you know, which was his love, because he had just gotten drafted by the Phillies. And then he got drafted by Uncle Sam, you know. So obviously that won out. But while he was in Japan, where he was stationed, he played baseball on the Army baseball team. And then he would sing at the NCO clubs at night. And he had to make a decision when he got back to the States, which direction am I going to head here? But he had met this man that was a sergeant, and he told him, he said, "If you ever get back to the States, I've got a friend that's a big time manager. He manages all kinds of huge artists, and I can take you to him and see if he's interested." So Dad got back and he decided, yeah, let's give it a shot. So I don't know how much of this you want me to go into.
As much as you'd like to.
Okay. All right. Well, it's kind of a fun story, but anyway, so when I was 6 months old, we went to New York City. I was the only child born with my mom and dad. And we went to New York City for him to pitch his songs to this big manager. And the guy said, okay, well, first thing I want to do is change your name. He said, what's wrong with Harold Jenkins? And he said, well, he said, you know, you got Elvis Presley that's really hot right now. And it's a unique name. And they're getting hundreds of records a day. The disc jockeys are. Everybody's wanting to break into this new sound. And he said, if you don't have some, he said, you can be a great singer, but nobody's ever going to listen to it. If with Harold Jenkins, you know, they're not going to pay attention and even give it a try. He said, so you get a unique name and then you got something here. So they came up with the name Conway after Conway, Arkansas, and Twitty after Twitty, Texas. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, they had the name, but he said, now what I want you to do is I want you to go to Canada, and I don't want you to be seen in the US at all until you go up there. And as long as it takes to perfect your craft, you know, you get your songs written, you do your show night after night, get your voice in the best shape you can. But when you get that one song that you feel like is the right song to pitch to a record label, you let me know. So me and mom and dad cut out, you know, I was 6 months old, and we moved to Hamilton, Ontario. And we lived up there for probably a year. And there's quite a few funny stories about even that, but I won't go. There's so many stories I could tell, but anyway, so him and his piano player were on break one night, and they would go up into this little room up above where the stage was. You'd go up a little staircase, and it was a little private room up there. So they went up there, and there was a piano up there, and the piano, they would play around and write songs in between shows and stuff. And he wrote this song called It's Only Make Believe. And he said, man, so he comes home and he plays it for my mom. He said, I think I wrote the magic song. And he played it for her, and she said, you know, I really like that, but I like that other song you wrote the other night better, a song called I'll Try. And so anyway, he calls Don C., the manager, and he said, I think I've got the song. And he said, all right, y'all come back and we'll take you to Nashville and see how it goes. We'll record 3 songs and then we'll pitch them to the major labels and see if it shakes out. So they did. They came back and they went into the big studio there, and they had, you know, the big band. Everybody played in the same room back then. There wasn't such thing booths, vocal booths, or, you know, where everything was separated out like it is today. But Dad was standing in the middle of the room singing with them, you know, and they were doing that song Only Make Believe, and it was magic. Everybody knew it was magic. And so the manager started pitching the song, and the record label MGM signed him. They said, oh yeah, we think he's great. Yeah, we want to sign him. But they said, we think I'll Try, the song my mom liked, is the hit. So they put I'll Try out as the A side, and the B side was It's Only Make Believe. And Dad said, this is not right, but you know, they're in control here, not me. You don't have much say at that point in your career. So anyway, they put out I'll Try, and it got spotty airplay. It charted, but it didn't go, you know, it's like it would go in a region, it would get a lot of airplay, and then it would pop up somewhere else, but it wasn't enough to pull the whole thing together and, you know, get it really.
It didn't go number one like It's Only Make Believe did.
Exactly.
You know.
So Dad said, that's it. I've given it my shot. I've got a family. I got to go home and make some money. So he called my granddad in Marianna, Arkansas. He said, can you put me to work on the farm? And Granddad thought, oh. So anyway, we all came back to Marianna and moved in a little apartment that was in their, you know, next to their home. And Dad would go to work with Granddad on the farm, and Granddad said he was not a farmer. so anyway, they thought, this is not good. But one day Dad gets a call, and there was this black DJ up in Cincinnati, Ohio, not Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio. And he said, Conway, he said, my name's Dr. Bob. And he said, you got the biggest hit we've ever had in Columbus. And Dad said, I do? And he said, yeah, because he thought it was over. And he said, yeah, we flipped your record, and the B-side's the hit. It's Only Make Believe. It's a monster record here. He said, can you and your band come? And Dad said, yeah. So they get the band together. Everybody's headed up there because they want to do promo things with everybody. And they have this car where it had Conway Twitty written on it, because they played several places in Canada. So they had the little sign painted on the car. And so he cuts out to Columbus, and he said, we pull into this town in the area that we knew where to go to. He said, there were people everywhere. He said it was a sea of people. You couldn't find a way to get through. And I thought, oh, we're going to be late. And I don't know what all these people are doing, but we're going to be late. And all of a sudden, those girls started looking over there, seeing that sign on the car, and they realized it was Dad in that car. Nobody knew what he looked like. They had only heard It's Only Make Believe, right? They didn't have a clue what he looked like. So they start rocking that car. And Dad said the whole car was like rocking back and forth. They were trying to get in there. And Dad was like, oh my gosh, he didn't know what to do. And finally, like 6 huge cops came up, and they pushed their way through the crowd, and they got to the car, and they tapped on the window. I said, roll the window down. Dad said, no way. And so finally, Dad got enough courage to roll the window down a little bit. He said, you're going to have to roll the window down. We can't open the door to get you out, but we need to get you out. Because Dr. Bob was doing a live broadcast on top of a drive-in restaurant. It was on the top of the building, and you could hear it through the air. And so they pulled Daddy out the window, and they put him on his back where he's looking up at the sky, and they carry him through that big crowd toward the stage. And he could hear coming over the loudspeakers, Dr. Bob hollering, yonder he come. Yonder come the big man. Yonder come Conway Twitty. And he said they got him up to the stage, and then you hear the big C chord of It's Only Make Believe. People see us everywhere, and he's having a pantomime, because the band can't get there. But anyway, he said it was a magic moment. I mean, that's when everything changed. Everything changed. His whole career just went. And It's Only Make Believe sold 8 million records. It went to #1 in 22 countries, and it was just a monster record. And it started off a huge career. And he did the rock and roll thing for about 7 years, I guess. In 1965, it went to #1 on my sister, the day my sister was born, November 8th, 58. And it went to #1 that day. And so from 58 to 65, that's when he made the switch to country. But yeah, that was his rock and roll career. But I can remember, back then, we didn't have a home. We went on the road with Dad so we could be with him. He said, I draw my strength from you guys. And if y'all aren't out here with me, I don't know that I can do this. So they all, Dad, Mom, get in the car, and of course everything's packed, and it was a station wagon. So you put the seats down, we had a pallet back there that we slept on. Mama had all the suitcases under her feet. And so she'd have to keep her feet up on the dashboard, while we were driving down the road. And we didn't have time to stop and eat. So we would look for a little grocery store, gas station with a little grocery store deli. They did that back then. And you could go in there and you could say, slice me, 5 pieces of bologna. And then they'd buy a loaf of bread and some mustard or whatever, and some Dr. Peppers for everybody. and we would cut out, and Mama would fix those sandwiches and hand them back to us. but that was, the best life. We loved being together. It was so much fun, so many wonderful memories.
How long did that last? Y'all been on the road with him?
Well, until we got to school age, once we got to where, we go to school now. And I went to kindergarten in Helena. We bought a house in Helena, and that would have been in 62. Yeah, 62.
Was Jimmy born at that time?
Yes, he was 2. He was born in 60.
Okay.
So we're 16 months apart. I was born in 57, then Kathy was born late 58, and then Jimmy was born the first part of 59. I mean, gotcha. 60. Sorry. So I'm telling my age, aren't I? Yeah, but it's okay. I am what I am. I can't deny it. The gray hair is going to speak differently. So, but anyway, so
you're rocking your age great though. So don't even worry about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you don't look a day under 63.
Well, the crazy thing is watching those documentaries that I've been watching, and the Life and Times, and then the Wheel, and and then certain things on YouTube. You don't look, you to me look better than even some of those that was a long time ago.
Well, thank you. Well, some of that was during very stressful times. And I remember the Wheel, yeah. We went there, and I wasn't even supposed to be on camera. I told him, I said, I'm coming, but I am not going to be on camera. No way. So our attorney, Brenda, who's my best friend, she was going to be on, Kathy was going to be on, and Billy Blythe, Dad's bus driver. We were all going to do it. And, nobody could remember the story like I did. I remembered all the details, So I kept saying, remember da, 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 da. And they said, you have got to get on camera. I said, oh, no. I didn't need more makeup. And they said, we don't care. You're the one that tells the story, right? So I thought, oh gosh. So
we're going to get there. I got a lot as far as all that's concerned too.
Yeah.
I'm still wondering. Okay, so all right, so we're at the 50s. Where you guys have gotten into school age. You're not able to be on the road with him anymore.
Right.
How was life in Helena through Joni Lee's eyes? During that time, and Dad not being around. At this point, he's trying to become country at this point.
No.
It's still a couple more years. Okay.
A couple more years. One of the things that we loved to do with Dad, and he loved it more than we did, was when he would come home, after that point, when we couldn't travel all the time with him. We went on during the summers and stuff. But one of his favorite things to do was get out the guitar and let us sing. Oh, he got a bigger kick out of that than anything he ever did. So I have a recording, and it's so awesome, of us. I had to be between 4 and 5. And I don't remember the exact year. I remember doing it, but I don't know exactly how old I was. But it's us in a little studio with Dad. He's playing flat top guitar, and talking to us, and we don't even know we're being recorded. But I guess I did, because I said, Mommy, you can brush my hair while I'm singing. But anyway, we were so country sounded. Oh Lord, we were country. But he took us in the studio, and we have that on audio. It's the coolest thing. I'm so happy we still have it. But that's how Don't Cry Joni got going, because he loved sitting around the house singing with us. But anyway, let me get backwards a little bit. Dad loved country music, and his shows were full of country music, even though he was doing the rock thing, the rock and roll music at that time. He always filled a show with country songs, and he wanted to record country so bad. And he kept asking his manager, can I, how much I love country. When I first got in music, I didn't feel like had earned the right to sing country music, because you know, those people are my heroes and I can't compete with my heroes, but I think I can do this rock and roll thing. So that's how he got into the rock and roll music. And he loved it and he enjoyed what he got to do there. But his heart was longing to go into country. But the managers thought, no, you're making, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars over here doing these shows. And then you're going to go to making $200 or $300 in country music because nobody knows you there. And you don't even know if they'll accept you there. And he kept telling him, no. And Dad said, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So there's a famous songwriter that's written more songs than I have years on this planet. And I'm talking major hit records. His name is Harlan Howard. He's gone, but he wrote some of the biggest songs you can imagine. And anyway, Harlan came to see Dad's show because he liked his rock and roll stuff. He said, boy, what are you doing singing this stuff? You need to be singing country and this. And I know, I'm trying. So every time Dad would come to Nashville to record one of his rock albums, he would go over after the session was over and do demos all night long of country songs he was writing. And I think Hello, Darling was written during that time before he ever made it into, you know, country music. And so finally, Dad put an ultimatum on his, another cool thing that happened. Dad wrote a song and he gets a phone call. He was on the road somewhere in a motel room in the middle of the day. And the phone rings and he picks up the phone and Dad said, hello. And the guy on the other end said, Conway? And he said, yeah. He said, this is Ray Price. And Dad said, yeah, and I'm Donald Duck. You know, I mean, he didn't believe it was Ray Price. And he said, no, this really is Ray Price. He said, I want to play my next single for you. It's a song you wrote. And he played a song that was a monster record for Ray Price that Dad had written called Walk Me to the Door. And Dad was like, you know, his jaw hit the ground and the phone dropped and he couldn't wait to hang up the phone to call my mom and say, oh my gosh, you know, I finally got into the country world. But yeah, he wrote a big hit for Ray Price, which was his hero, one of his heroes. So anyway, he was getting ready to go do a date up in Summers Point, New Jersey for about a month, maybe 2 months. He was going to be gone. And we would go up there with him, you know, when we could. And so anyway, he told his manager, Don, he said, when I get done with this gig, or he didn't say gig back then, but when I get done with these shows, I'm doing country. He said, okay, Conway. You know, he was just pacifying him. And he was getting ready to go on stage one night. He was at the hotel still, and, you know, getting ready to go over to the place. And somebody knocked on the door and they had a huge stack of new contracts for rock and roll music. And he said, that's it. So he's on stage that night and he had already talked to the owner of the club and he told them what he was going to do. And he was right in the middle of the room and he laid his guitar down and he looked at his band and he said, boys, I can't do this anymore. I'm headed to the house. If y'all want to come, come. So he packed up. They headed back to Oklahoma. We had moved to Oklahoma by this time. It was 1965. And he didn't have anything in the works. But he said, I'd rather be playing for the door, doing what I love, than doing what I don't enjoy anymore. So he did. He cut out, came back. And Harlan Howard took him to the studio again. So let's do some more songs. So he did. And he took the tape over to Owen Bradley, who was a legendary producer. He did Patsy Cline, Jim Reeves, I mean, you name it, Loretta Lynn, everybody who was big in country music at that time, he was producing them. And he took the tape over and he said, I'm not going to tell you who it is. I just want to play it for you. And Mr. Bradley sat down and he said, man, that boy's good. And he said, well, tell me, who is it? Who is it? He said, well, you won't believe it if I tell you, but it's Conway Twitty. He said, the rock singer? He said, yeah. He said, well, man, that boy's a country singer. And anyway, he ended up signing Dad to Decca Records. And the first single that they put out on him, you know, did well. It charted, but it wasn't a big thing because a lot of, you know, country music stations back then, they were very tight knit and they didn't go outside their circle much. And they were a small number of country stations back then, but they were a tight little community, and they didn't let too many people in their world. And they didn't trust the fact that this rock and roll star was coming into their yard to play, you know, and they weren't sure if they were going to let him in yet. But he kept putting out great song after great song after great, you know, and they finally started going, wow, this guy really is a country singer and he's here to stay. And so his first #1 record was Next in Line, and it went to #1 in 1968. Shortly after that, he was in the studio getting ready to record his, and you know, it put him into that little star place. But the next album that he was getting ready to do, they recorded, and he said to Owen Bradley, he said, I've got this song I've been carrying around for years. I got it in my, you know, guitar case, and if you don't mind, do you mind if we lay it down after we get through with this, you know, putting the 10 songs down that are going on the album? He said, no, not at all. So they did, and he walked up to the microphone. He showed the band how to play it, and he walked up and he started singing, hello, darling. You know, sorry, my nose is stuffed up. And Owen said, wait a minute, Conway. He said, that's a good song. He said, instead of singing those words, why don't you try speaking them? And so Dad then stepped up to the microphone and went, hello, darling. And that was it. Everybody in the room knew that they were in the presence of something that was going to be monstrous. And it was. And they obviously put it out as the next single, and it was huge. And Dad said that the first time he went out on concert after it had just been released like a couple of days, but it was like wildfire. And he said, I stepped up to the microphone. I put it at a certain point in my show that I'd put new songs, you know, that were just coming out, because you don't know how they're going to be received. And he said, I stepped up to the microphone and said, hello, darling. He said, the building exploded in sound with people. And he said, they wouldn't stop. He said, I couldn't get the rest of the song out. He said, it took my breath away. He had to step back. You know, he said, I got the biggest lump in my throat and tears running down my face because it was so powerful, you know. And he said that he couldn't believe what was happening. He knew then that this song was going to be a career changer, and it was. And not only did it become, you know, a monstrous song, and everybody, you know, just fell apart when they heard it. He got called a few years later. This was in the 70s. And this man said, Conway, I'm a friend of the astronaut Tom Stafford. And he said, he's the commander of the flight that's going up, the Apollo Soyuz. I can't say it properly, but he said, and they want you to send some music. They want to give your music to the Russians when they link in space. This was like a big deal, right? Huge deal. Because we were in the middle of the Cold War with Russia, but the people were grand. I mean, they were really nice people, and they loved country music. And so this was going to be like a goodwill gesture, you know, where the Americans and the cosmonauts would link in space together. And then it was going to be this worldwide event, right? So they were going to present to the Russian cosmonauts Conway Twitty music. And while they were on the phone talking about how this was going to take place and what to get ready for him, somebody asked General Stafford, they said, you know, what's your favorite Conway Twitty song? And he said, hello, darling. You know, he's from Texas. He said, hello, darling. So Jimmy J, who was my dad's booking agent, they were partners in his booking agency. He said, I got an idea. He said, why don't we get Conway to go in and record this in Russian? And Dad said, I don't speak Russian. He said, yeah, but you can learn it. So Dad hires a linguist. Well, he was a Russian professor at the University of Oklahoma. And he went in the studio. Well, they practiced for about two weeks before they did it, like when Dad had time off. And then he went with him into the studio and he recorded Hello, Darling in Russian. So when they linked in space, the first thing you could hear, Walter Cronkite, who was the big news anchor back then, he said, and here's Conway Twitty singing Hello, Darling in Russian. And you hear Daddy say, Privet Proroist. I think that's pretty close to how you say it. But anyway, Dad sang Hello, Darling in Russian. It was the coolest thing. It's such a great memory for Dad. I mean, how many people can say I've been played in outer space?
That's wild.
Around the world. Yeah.
Crazy. And thinking about the him crossing over to country, I just wonder it in 65 or so when he did that, how many people previously had attempted that. I mean, just anywhere in that time period comes to mind, like Kenny Rogers, but that was many years after that.
Oh, it was many years after that. Oh no, Dad was a trendsetter. He was the first one to attempt that. I mean, you had Patsy Cline, who was a country artist. Now she got pop airplay. Yeah. But she wasn't a pop artist coming into the country world. She was a country girl being crossed over. So it was a whole different ballgame. And Dad was a trendsetter. He brought all these new teeny boppers, and there were millions of them, and he brought them into country music with him. So he helped grow country music tremendously because it was the first time they'd been experienced, had any experience with
a bunch of eyes on
it. Exactly. Bunch of new listeners and a whole new young generation of listeners, and so he brought them with him. And that's one thing about Dad, even today, he still sells a ton of records. He's been gone since 1993. And for him to still be selling the same songs, repackaged time after time, and they just recently, I got to know all the folks over at Universal Music Group, and I went in there and met with them one day. And we just did a new contract with them. And one of the things I said I want in there, because Dad's original albums have been out of print or out of rotation for a long time because, they're older. Sure. And I said, one of the things I want to happen in our new contract is every year, I want so many albums to be reissued, either in digital downloads or in, the other, what you call it, not digital downloads, or what's the other one? You got not hard copy. Streaming.
Yep. As soon as you said it, I thought of it. Now, this was a long period though, from the Rock and Roll I'm Done to Hello Darling starting. I mean, we're talking about several years, right? We're talking about, but when he decided to stop and the rock and roll thing.
That was in 65 when he stopped rock and roll. His first #1 record was in 1968. So that was 3 years, but he had some top tens, coming in. He was getting put on package shows and things like that. He was getting some notoriety built up. Yeah. But it wasn't until Hello Darling. I mean, Next in Line was a big record. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to take away from that at all. It was a big #1 record.
It wasn't like he was not working. I mean, he was
right. Oh yeah, he was working. And when he very first made the move, we lived in Oklahoma, and he would just work locally around the Oklahoma area, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, places like that. And he'd play for the Door, and he had enough notoriety with the name Conway Twitty, people already knew who he was. They just didn't know what new he was doing. But he would play for the Door, and he'd come home with a big old thing of $1 bills, Yeah, so it was a drastic change there for a little while, but it didn't take long. 1969 was 4 years later. And excuse me, and that's when Hello Darling hit, and then it just went later, through the roof. Yeah.
So that was a big risk. I mean, it wasn't like he had a guaranteed something waiting on him. I mean, it was like a year's window, a few years of trying to make something else happen in a totally different genre.
Yeah. exactly. Yeah, it was. It was like starting over, except he had the name power.
Right.
You know, and that was still there. And all those
It's
kids.
been career suicide for some of these artists now. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Joni.
No, you're right.
We were talking. We had a guy
You're
on
right.
the band Perry. You know, the band Perry. It's been almost career suicide. They tried to go from country to pop, and it's killed them. You know. But anyways, I'm
absolutely.
sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. I mean, you're absolutely right. That's just, I think the Dixie Chicks did the same thing. You know, of course, they made a few political statements that really got a knock with their country fans. But then they thought, well, Hollywood can accept us now, you know, but it didn't. I mean, they might do it for a minute, but it's not a long-lasting thing. And they were so talented. I love the Dixie Chicks, you know. But once you get a country fan, they're with you for life. But if you ever put your little, you know, fingers up and nose, you know, thumb them off, they don't come back. And that's, you know, that's for sure. You better, you know, that, like I think Jeremy was saying, you could sing the phone book. Well, no, they trust you to give them the right thing. And if you start going down there and trying to please yourself, that's what so many artists do. They go and they do what makes them happy. You know, oh, well, I like to sing this kind of thing. But it's not what the audience wants to hear. And any you know, buildup of crowd that you've gotten, you start changing your direction on them, and they might not want to go with you unless you're just super special and it's cemented, you know, like Dad was. He cemented it in stone before he made that change, you know, and then he brought all those young people with him. So it was just, you know, it was a leap of faith, and his inner voice told him that's the right leap of faith.
Well, and having the, you know, the talent and the songs to make that happen. I mean, it'd have been different if maybe the material wasn't there, or he didn't have the kind of voice he did.
Yeah. You know, he, when he was 4 years old, my grandmother's, that, you know, it was during the Depression, and they lived in a little dirt shack. I mean, it was very, very humble beginnings right there on the Mississippi River in Friars Point and Mississippi. And anyway, you know, for them to be able to have a Christmas present, they saved up all year to have a chocolate pie. And that was like their Christmas gift. But he loved to sing. And he would go around the house singing as a little bitty boy. And so my mama, my daddy's mother, saved up, I think it was $2.99. She used to tell us that story, but she bought this little bitty toy ukulele guitar, you know, and he would sit up there and they'd put him on the stool and he would play that thing, try to strum it and sing, and people around town, they'd give him a penny, you know, to sing or whatever they could afford, and he'd sing for everybody in Friars Point. And then there was a old black man that lived next door to him, and he called him Uncle Fred, and Uncle Fred had a guitar, and you know, that area is the blues country, you know, where I'm talking about, around Clarksdale and all that. But anyway, Uncle Fred played the blues and sang the blues. So he taught Dad about blues music, you know, and Dad would just sit there and he'd do these old bluesy songs, you know, and his little fingers would stretch to try to reach the chords, you know, to play the chords. And that's where he got, you know, his influence from that time. But on Saturday night now, all his family would gather, and they had one little radio that, you know, was battery operated, I guess. But anyway, they'd turn it on and they'd tune into the Grand Ole Opry. And that's where his love for country music came in. And it wasn't until he got home from the you know, Army before he heard his first Elvis Presley record. Yeah. So that's when his love for that music came in. So it was just everything had some influence in his voice, and he carried it with him through every part of his career, you know, from singing the really traditional country music like Hello, Darling, Linda on My Mind, things like that, into songs like Goodbye Time and all that, he still carried that soulfulness. And I think that's why people nowadays, they're so hungry for those people who sing from their heart and their soul and their emotions. And, you know, it wasn't just about singing a song or getting up there in a feel good thing, you know,
it was real.
It was real, and it was real life stories. And you may not have lived them, but you sing about, you know, the movie you saw, or somebody else's life that you know, what happened in their story. And that's how songs come to songwriters. It's not necessarily they lived it. You know, people used to ask Dad all the time, who's Linda, you know? And he'd say, I'll never tell. But you don't want to you don't want to break that mystique either. You don't want to say Linda's a made-up name. You know, it's like the song Don't Cry Joni. I mean, obviously I didn't date my dad, you know. He just put my name in the song and my brother Jimmy's name in the song. And that's how that came about. You know, it was just one of those things that he created this little story. And it certainly wasn't a factual story because I wasn't old enough. I was probably, you know, 7 or 8 years old when we started singing that. So, yeah.
So, around what age do you remember grasping exactly how big your dad had gotten? That, you know, it's not just, I mean, obviously, you know, he's regular guy, just your dad, but I mean, that hit you like, oh my God, he's this other guy too, that to everybody.
Well, I grew up with it, so I didn't know any different. I thought everybody's dad went out and sang on stage in front of thousands of people, you know. But that when it really, really hit me how huge he was when Don't Cry Joni came out, and I had the privilege of touring with him and seeing this reaction night after night after night, and just like, I mean, it was like his soul connected to the people sitting in those chairs' souls, and they showed him how much they appreciated it every night. And you know, that's when it really impacted me the biggest to see, you know, from a professional place rather than just his daughter's place, you know. Right. I just didn't think too much about it. I thought, well, that's normal. You know, everybody hollers and screams for my daddy. And, you know, I didn't get that excited. Well, I did, you know, a couple things had happened. I can remember we were in New York City one time and they were playing Madison Square Garden, and it was a big package show. Dolly was on there, and oh gosh, I can't remember. I remember Dolly because I just loved her, and Loretta and Dad were on there. Anyway, I remember things like that. I was about 14 during that time, and we saw him at Madison Square Garden, and I thought that was pretty cool. But still, it didn't hit me until Don't Cry Joni, how huge he was. And, you know, I was out there trying to do the same thing. I thought, oh gosh, how do I think I can ever fill these shoes? You know, there's no way.
Oh, that had to be wild.
Well, I had it easier than the guys. I mean, like Jimmy never wanted to pursue music. He was the baseball player and wanted, you know, Daddy wanted him to go pro ball so bad, and he played through college. But anyway, Mike always wanted to sing, and then my nephew Trey now wants to follow in those footsteps, but they have a harder time because people compare them constantly because it's male on male, you know. But that's beauty unfair. It is. It's hard. It's hard. So, but I just realized it's too big of shoes for me to try to fill. So I decided I want to do this for a little while and then go home and have children and be a mama and housewife and, you know, do all those kind of things. That was way more fun to me than going out there and beat my body up, driving, doing one-nighters, you know, 600-700 miles apart, and having to load the equipment like you guys did the other night. I thought, how many amplifiers have I carried? How many PA systems have I broken down and carried? You know, while the band was out there, you know, flirting, I was breaking down the equipment, and they worked for me. But that's who I am. I was always a hard worker. So
Well, that's something we've talked about with a lot of people, on the podcast before. And of course,
yeah,
lived it on a small scale. But,
yeah,
people see you up there playing like, man, you guys got it made. You're getting to go up and do this all the time and get paid. Like, you guys don't see where we're earning our money before and after this for
that's right.
hours and hours.
That's right. Absolutely. I cannot tell you how many times we've been in like blinding snowstorms, headed through Ohio and have to get out with the stick and brush the snow off the sign just so you could see if you were even on a road, much less the right road,
Wow.
Yeah. But I did get to tour a lot with Dad, because of Don't Cry Joni. I got to ride on the bus, and that was fun. I enjoyed that way more than when I was out there doing my myself with my band. But I had fun. I enjoyed that part too. I got to do some unique things, and my husband John and I, because we have such similar backgrounds, with going out there doing those kind of shows. And boy, are there some funny stories you can tell about things like that. You go in there going, oh, Lord, Calgon, take me away. But it was a fun life. I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I had that experience, and I wouldn't take anything for it. I wouldn't go back to it for $1 million.
Well, you wouldn't know unless you tried, though. Wouldn't know the difference.
No. Those days are long gone. But it was so cute. We were at Oak Grove, at where y'all were playing, a couple weeks before you guys came, and my husband was with me, and we went into the little private VIP area, and the girl in there was singing away. She was from Singapore. She was from Singapore. Yeah. And anyway, my husband, John, said, oh, well, you have a pretty little voice. And she said, oh, thank you. I love to sing. She had that real broken English sound. And she was really sweet. And I said, well, he's the singer. And she said, oh, sing for me. He said, no. I said, well, he sings on a lot of hit records, and has sang on tons of people's records, very famous people. And she said, oh, that's so nice. And then John says, well, she sang on a big hit record too. He said, I knew she'd know it because Don't Cry Joni was so huge in the middle, the Far East country.
Wow.
Yeah, the Asian countries. It was huge over there. And he said, I knew she'd know the song. And he said a song called Joni. And she said, I know that song. And she started singing it. Now, she isn't from here. She, lives here now, but she was born and raised there and moved over here as an adult. And she said, oh, my mom and I used to play it every Saturday, all day long. And that was our favorite song. And she knew every word to it.
That's crazy.
Every word. I know. So I thought, oh, that is so cool, because she's probably y'all's age. I mean, she's 40-ish. And, I thought, how does she even know that song? Because that was in 1975 before she was born. Right. But she did. They still play it over there. It's cool.
I've seen many YouTube people, Asians, doing that song. Now that you say that,
yeah,
I saw a bunch of them recording.
I know, it's so funny. John showed me one video once of they would use it to teach English. The boys would do the Conway part, the Jimmy part, and the girls would do the Joni part, and they learned to speak English with that song.
Oh, wow.
I know, it's crazy.
Now, speaking of Don't Cry Joni, you felt like you were kind of tricked into that.
Yeah.
He told you he was going to take your voice off the track and replace it with a professional singer, and
he did.
Ended up keeping your track on there. And
did.
You felt like, and you told me this at Oak Grove, you kind of felt like it's shaky, your little trembling voice a little bit in there, but it sounds great,
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And, we've been singing that song since I was a little girl.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, that's a great little song. It turned out really good. So when I was 17, I was 17, about to turn 18. I was living in Hendersonville. I moved here before my family because it was right in the middle of my senior year. And I moved in with my aunt and uncle, and Dad came over to their house one day, and he said, getting ready to record. And he said, I've been thinking about our little song. He said, would you come do it with me on my next album? I said, oh, no, Dad, I'd be way too embarrassed, you know. He said, well, I'll make a deal with you. And I said, okay, Dad. And he said, if you'll come in and sing it, just to show the girl how it goes, like these professionals couldn't figure that out on their own, you know.
Yeah.
But he said, if you'll just come in and put the Joni part down, then we'll take your voice off and let her sing it. I said, okay, Dad, you know. So I go to the studio, and they have me out there, and I'd been singing it, like I said, all my life. And I was so nervous, I had to read the words. I had the words up here like this, and I was reading them. And they punched the button, and from the control room, Dad and Mr. Bradley, Owen Bradley produced it, said, Joni, honey, can you hang on just a minute? And I said, yeah. And they said, we got a technical thing going on in here, and they're pulling faders down and doing all kinds of things and twisting the pods and, you know, trying to figure out what's going on. And they start back the music again, and they looking at each other like, there it is again, you know. And finally Dad said, I saw his finger go like this, and he said, hey, Joni. I said, what? And he said, can you try putting your paper down for just a minute? And I said, okay. And I put my paper down, you know, where I was holding the words up, and I was shaking so hard they could hear the paper rattling coming through the microphone. Yeah. And it was me scared to death. So anyway, I left the studio, you know, came back to Hendersonville, didn't think too much about it. Then I graduated from high school, and I was going to college up in the Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. My best friend is named Donna Dixon, and she was in a show called Bosom Buddies, and she's now married to Dan Aykroyd. But we were best friends, and we were living together up there. And my dad calls one day when we get home from our classes, and he said, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He said, we got a smash. I said, a smash what? He said, a smash hit. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I didn't take Don't Cry Joni off, you know, your voice off of Don't Cry Joni. I put it on the B side of my single that just went to #1. And he said, and after the Touch the Hand went to #1, the disc jockey started flipping the record over and playing Don't Cry Joni. He said, Joni, it's a monster record. I said, what? And I said, oh, you're kidding. So, of course, the first thing I do, Donna and I get on the phone, and we call the country radio station there in Alexandria. And we say, can you play that song by Conway and his daughter? And they said, oh, sure, we'll get right on. And I just knew they were going to say, yeah, Joni, we'll get right to it. But they didn't know who I was or that I was living in that area even. But I think they did. I think they said, we heard she's living in this area. But so Dad calls me back another couple weeks later, and he said, the CMA just called, and they want us to come perform Don't Cry Joni this year on the award show. I said, what? And so I said, I guess. So I flew home. I didn't tell my teachers, anybody, nobody there knew who I was. So I come home, and we go and we do rehearsals. And during rehearsals, they tell me, and I know I've told you all this story before, but they told me, they said, you're going to come on immediately following Glenn Campbell singing Rhinestone Cowboy. And that, you know, that was cool. And I said, okay. So they told me, now you're going to be seated out in the audience with your dad and your family. And then someone's going to come around and get you, bring you around the back of the Opry House, the new Opry House, you know, the one, well, it's not new anymore, but then it was brand new. And then they'll take you back. They'll check your hair and your makeup and everything. And then you're going to carry both microphones out, hand your dad his microphone, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm waiting. And Glenn Campbell's in the second verse of Don't Cry Joni, and nobody came to get me. And I thought, this is not what they told me at rehearsal. And so Dad, I leaned over to him. I said, they didn't come get me. He said, well, maybe you ought to go on and walk back there. So I start walking back, and I see this little young guy with a clipboard walking up toward me. He said, oh, are you Joni? And I said, yes. And he said, well, do you want to stay here and wait and see if your dad wins the next award? And then they're going to go to a commercial break. I said, are you sure? He said, yeah. I said, well, this is what they told me. And I told him the story. And he said, well, let me look down. You know, he has this little light on the paper, and he looks down and he said, can you run? And I said, oh my gosh, because I knew I didn't have long on rhinestone cowboy left, you know. So here I go in these high heel shoes, and it's cobblestone floors there, you know, and it's like clip, 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 clip. Sounding like a horse running down the street. But anyway, with my dress hiked up over my knees, you know, and I'm running, and they don't have time to check my hair, my makeup, nothing. They just put the microphones in my hand and shove me on the stage. And I'm out there going, because I'm out of breath, you know. I couldn't breathe to sing, and I start the song. But I made it through, and it's probably a good thing that I didn't have to stand there and think about it. Yeah, because I knew there was like 80 million people watching, and if I had thought about it, I probably would have freaked out. So anyway, the next day, I go to Rivergate Mall, and people were coming up and asking me for my autograph. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. You know? But I saw that it really was a big record. And then I got back on the plane, went back home, and I was going to go back to college, right? And I go into my English class, and my teacher was going, you didn't tell me. He said,
we got a superstar in here.
I know, and of course my face would, because I was so shy back then, believe it or not, but I was very shy, and I just like, oh, I glowed. And it wasn't long after that, Dad called me, and he said, MCA just contacted me, and they want to do a project on you. They want you to put out a single right away and record an album, and they're going to sign you as an artist. And I said, okay. So I get the band together, you know. My kid's dad, Chris, who we were married, we got married right after that, but he was my drummer. And then we hired the band that was from that little club that Donna's daddy owned, which was called Hillbilly Heaven. And so they all came with me to Nashville and became my band. And I went in and recorded. My first single was a song called I'm Sorry, Charlie. And Dad wrote it for me, and it took off like crazy. You know, we went to number 5, and that was crazy. And then I had several singles after that. Won the new female vocalist of the year in all the trade magazines. Got offered movie deals, but I said, oh no, I couldn't do that. But I really had a great experience. You know, I enjoyed it. I was very green. I had no idea what I was doing. Hadn't really been singing that long in a professional way. So I finally, in 79, I said that I want to go home. I want to go home and have children and, you know, be a mama. So I quit the road. And then after my son was born in 84, he was about 3. And we started a trio, and we played at Twitty City, and then we played at Opryland Hotel. And we got to where we were real famous in this area, and people in Nashville knew us. We called ourselves, at first, we were Twitty City Trio because we sang there, but then we became Southern Breeze. And there's nothing out on us, but we really wanted to go that route. We had great harmony. I mean, I'm not trying to brag on myself, but the 2 brothers, you know, that natural brother harmony, and I just fit right in. So one of us would be singing lead while the other 2 did the harmonies, and then vice versa. You know, it would all switch around. But that was really fun. And that's when I truly enjoyed music. And we did Cajun music, which was so funny because I'm sitting there singing in French. I had no idea what I was saying, or if it was even I'm sure it wasn't right. I just sounded like them, you know, in harmony, in harmony. But now that I enjoyed. I really did. I had a blast doing that. We would do the Ralph Emery morning show every day. Not every day, but at least once a month. But we worked 7 days a week and 7 nights a week.
Oh, wow.
Never stopped. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. We never took a break ever.
And Ralph Emery just passed.
He did. He sure did. He was my first professional interview.
That's
Ralph
awesome.
Emery. Yeah. Well,
he was big time.
Yeah, he was. He was big time, no doubt. He was my dad's first professional interview in country music, and he was my first professional interview in country music. So we kind of had that in common. But yeah, he was a good guy.
That picture behind you, is that you around the time of the late 70s?
That's right after I quit music. Right after I quit music, I had that in my attic. And John saw it and he said, I want this picture. And so I said, oh, Lord, no. But he wanted it framed and put up. So I got Dennis Carney, who used to do a lot of my dad's album shoots. I got Dennis or headshots and stuff. You know, I got Dennis to go in and touch it up and then blow it up. And so we had it redone. I had it redone for John for a birthday or a Christmas or something, and had it framed for him. So I said, well, we're putting it in the closet. He said, no. So he insisted. I'm not like that. I wouldn't have my own picture. But anyway, he insisted. So I'd let him have his way after arguing a lot.
So we're around this time, and I want to ask you about this. I want to ask you about the divorce in 1972. And my question is, because I heard several people say it on the documentary of your mother, Mickey, not having she was having difficulty with, is what they said, of him being gone a lot and certain situations, things. What is your thought? What is your thoughts on that whole period around that time?
Not true. I mean, trust me, everything you see, you can believe maybe a 16th of it.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Well, just like me and you talked about in that Will documentary. Yeah. If you listen to a couple of people in that, you're going to be thinking one way, but if you listen to the children, you're going to be thinking another way, you know.
That's an example. You know, the guy they had in there that was an attorney, right? He never came close to our case. Never, didn't even have a clue who the man was. Uh-huh. He was never involved in our case. He was some attorney out in some other state that didn't even know Tennessee law. He had no clue what happened in our story. And I told Kathy, I said, that's why I didn't want to do this thing, because I knew they were going to edit it down and turn it, you know, to where it didn't sound right, like the real story. I gave them the real story, and I gave them probably more than I should have, but I did. I told them things that curled their hair, and the director was like, oh my gosh. Same thing happened with People magazine. They came to the auction at Twitty City, you know, when we had to have the estate sale. And the girl came to us and she said, tell me your story. And I told her, and she was like, oh my Lord, well, you certainly don't read this in reality. I said, you can have access to my files, my attorneys. You can talk to any of these people. And Kathy did the same thing, my sister, because we were the two fighting the battle. And they were blown away. They said, this certainly is not the way it's been presented to the public, you know, that she's this poor little widow and that Conway didn't have a will and blah, blah, blah. You know, that there's so many misconceptions out there because it's not at all how it took place. But anyway, I got off track of what you asked me about my mom and dad.
Yeah, well, there was a divorce in 72, but they got remarried in 74. They were already married for a while.
It was into 72. It was about a year before they got back together. No, when Dad would come home, he was so busy at this point. You know, this was Hello, Darling. And he was really expanding his world. He had a restaurant that had become franchised called Twitty Burger.
Twitty Burger. Uh-huh.
Yeah. He had mobile home lots because they were really big in Oklahoma City, and it was franchised.
Convenience stores.
Yes.
Yeah. The talent booking
and
agency. And yeah.
Yes. The booking agency in Nashville.
This is before the AAA baseball team, though.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes. That was after we moved to Nashville area, Hendersonville. But yeah, Mom said, wait a minute, you've got your 3 kids here and you work all the time now. And she said it was just about getting his attention. And she cut out. And she said, you raise them. Well, Dad was like, oh gosh, because here he is with 3 kids. I mean, I was 16, I think, at the time, but, and the others were just, right below me. But he had to bring my Mama Jenkins, my dad's mom, out here, out to Oklahoma City to stay with us when he was on the road. So he was the saddest thing. He wrote some of the biggest sad songs that he's ever written during those years, during that year time. He was just like a little puppy dog. He missed her so bad. And she missed him too, but she wanted to make sure that he understood you got to balance things. It can't all be work and it can't all be children. It's got to be both. Because here she was with 3 kids trying to get me to cheerlead, trying to get Kathy to beauty pageant, trying to get Jimmy to every baseball practice that there was. And she was spread too thin, and going in every direction, trying to juggle all the balls at once, plus keep a home. And when he got home, cook meals. And, she was the best mom, the best wife, very loyal and dedicated, and worked so hard, to make our home perfect. And he missed it. He missed it bad. And he could not wait for them to get remarried. So they did. They remarried in Las Vegas when he was out there. They were already kind of back together at that point. But yeah, they remarried in Vegas. And then they stayed married for all those years. And then, and this is jumping way up in time, but in 85, that's when it was the second time that they separated.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
Well,
How far?
I've got some other. Yeah, I got some things I'm on. So leading up to that.
Okay, all right. You just take the run. I get going.
Well, and there's a reason, because there's some things that I think maybe even the fall, and we'll talk about that too. But my thing is the 70s. I wanted to say this.
Yeah.
The 70s, he was killing it. He was killing it. And it was just hit after hit after hit. And
he's in the 80s. Yeah.
Him and Loretta was getting recognized by the Academy of Country Music Awards and the Country Music Awards as a duo.
They did win a Grammy. Yeah.
Yeah. But he was almost getting shunned by both awards association as a country solo artist in a lot of ways. And this guy was kicking everybody else's butt. And it's like, how can you keep your back turned? Do you think it had, and this is just me outsider looking in, I'm wondering, because I'm just learning about this, man. I always thought this guy was just huge and there never was these issues. I never knew about him until I started all this research, right? I always just thought he was, probably was entertainer of the year a whole bunch of times and whatever. But he did win male vocalist of the year from the ACMs, Academy of Country Music.
He would win it every single year, every year. And we'd fly out to California. This was before it was televised. And I said, Dad, the first year they were going to televise it, I said, I hate to say this, but you're not going to win this year. And he said, what do you mean? He said, I've won this for years. I said, because the record labels are involved now, it's televised. It becomes a whole different thing when it's televised. And he said, I never thought about that. And that's exactly what happened. It's because the record labels, he wasn't a butt kisser, excuse my French, but he wasn't. He wasn't the political guy in the music industry. He wasn't the kind that he didn't join the Grand Ole Opry, never did. He revered the Opry. I mean, it's what gave him his career, was listening to all those hours of country music on the radio. And he loved the Grand Ole Opry. He, held it on a high pedestal. In fact, he recorded a song that told how he felt about it, called The Grandest Lady of Them All. And it's a great song. You should listen to it. I'm sure you probably haven't heard it, but it was a great song. But back during that time period, if you were a member of the Grand Ole Opry, you had to dedicate so many weekends out of the year, to play that. Well, that's when these country artists make their big monies, the weekends. I mean, those are your big dates. And he thought, do I want to make $100,000 over here this weekend or $350 a night, on the Grand Ole Opry? And
I
he
saw
said,
something similar about George Strait. I think maybe didn't join for the same reason, just
same
all the
thing.
obligations.
Absolutely. It's ridiculous, that. But Dad loved it. He always paid the highest regards to it, and said that it was his background, it was his roots, and so he gave it all the respect that it deserved. But he had a career without it, and career in spite of his record label at the time. Now, the new people at Universal, I love them, I do. But back during those days, they didn't put $10 into promoting Conway Twitty. He did everything based on his pure, raw power of drawing those butts in the seats, He would sell out show after show after show and break record after record, even breaking his own records. And, he was the biggest drawing name out there out of all the people that were winning the, CMA Artist Entertainer of the Year. And not to take away from them, we love them. I don't mean to, but it was a real fact that he was outdrawing these people that were winning these awards.
Oh, yeah.
And as his daughter and my siblings, Kathy and Jimmy and Mike and I, it would break our hearts that he was not mentioned or recognized. It didn't faze him. He didn't care. He said, my awards are sitting in those seats night after night when they show up, and they let me know how much they appreciate what I'm doing. I don't need that gold statue standing up on my mantle, to make me feel like I've accomplished something. I know that these people being so loyal and dedicated to what I do, that's enough for me. They are my awards. And he had the right attitude. And he said, another thing is, once you've been perceived at the top, there's nowhere to go but down. He said, I like playing that going stealth, where you're right under the radar and nobody's paying attention to you. They're not going to try to knock you down. And you just keep going and going and going, and more people root for you. So really, it was a brilliant strategy, not to go in and tell MCA Records, hey guys, I really would like to win this year. If y'all could block vote for me. He could have done that multiple times, but he chose not to. He said, that means nothing, when you go in there and it's all set up, basically. And not everybody, I shouldn't say it like everybody's is, because I don't want to diminish anyone who's been honored that. I'm not trying to sound like I'm bitter or anything. I'm not. But, when you see your dad sitting there and they don't call his name, it breaks your heart. You can't help it. But it didn't break his. It didn't break his. And that's all I cared about, really, was that he was okay with the outcome. And every time he was fine. He said, ain't they hot? That's the way he looked at it.
But Buddy, everything him and Loretta would do, they would jump all over it. I mean, they would be,
They did.
duo of the year. I mean, every year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they
but
did.
he was killing. He was absolutely just top the man.
Oh
Even
yeah,
solo during that time. And
that's right. And Loretta wasn't selling that many records, but she was the only female
country
that
music
was.
royalty at that point. Yeah, lady. Yeah.
Oh, she's the only female at that time period that could be a headliner without anybody, higher than her. She was the
Correct.
headliner. She was the draw power.
She was the
And
country music queen.
she was. And, her and Dad together here's an interesting story. I don't even know if I told you guys this, but I may have. 1969, my dad was booked on his first trip over to England for a country music show. And it was called the Wembley Festival. That's what they called it. And it wasn't until years later that I found out that there was this young little blonde-headed guy who had a monster record called K that was booked on the same tour. And it was my husband,
Wow.
John. Yeah. He was 17. So he and I were the same age when we had our baby. Well, he had just turned 8. Yeah.
It's a small world. I just told you that the other day.
I know. So he was booked on that same show with my dad. In fact, my dad and his bass player was Joe Lewis, and he did all the harmonies on Dad's records back then. And he and Dad were sitting at the back of the plane because it was a flight that was just the artist and their bands and road crews that were, it was a what do you call it when you gosh, my mind's blank. When they leased a plane out for just those people. I can't think of the word. I'm just blank. But anyway, so it was just this group that was going on this tour on this flight.
Charter.
And it was big charter plane. Yeah, I think, well, that's not exactly it. But anyway, it was just, charter's probably. Anyway, it was just them going on this trip. I'm sorry, my head's spinning. And Big Joe and Dad were back. Dad got out a flat top guitar and he was singing, and Joe was singing harmony with him. And John, my husband, now gets up and goes back to the back of the plane and jumps in there and sings harmony with them because he loved harmony. His whole family did harmony their whole lives. He had 3 sisters that had beautiful harmony, and they recorded behind Willie Nelson and a lot of people back then. They weren't famous yet, but anyway, they had a little career going too. And so anyway, John was there the first Wembley festival. And that's when Dad and Loretta, well, let me tell you the cute story about how they met. Loretta was recording, and she had been telling Owen Bradley that she wanted to meet Conway Twitty, this new upcoming new superstar in country. And they hadn't met yet. And she said, "Oh, I'm a big fan. I got a poster of him up over my bedroom ceiling." And she said, "I love Conway." And so anyway, Loretta was finishing an album, and Dad was the next act coming in, but Owen didn't tell her Dad was going to be there. So he called Dad and he said, "I want you to come in and sneak in and surprise Loretta and get here a little bit early." So Dad did. And she was standing there talking to Owen Bradley with her back to the door, that you came into. And he said, "You've been telling me you want to meet Conway Twitty." She said, "Oh, I do." And he said, "Well, there he is right behind you." And she turns around and she said, "I jumped up and squealed for 2 minutes." She said, "I was squealing and squealing and hollering and carrying on and hugging him." And anyway, she just loved him, and they had this instant bond. So while they were on this trip to Wembley, Loretta was on the trip too. They started talking about, why don't we record together? And they both loved the idea because Dad respected her so much, obviously, and she loved his singing. So, here we are, we can do this together, but we have to be really careful not to step on the toes of our careers as individual artists. So they came back, and first thing they did was set up a meeting at the label, and they said, "Oh no, it's a bad idea. Bad idea. You will kill your own individual careers." And they said, "We don't think so. We're going to do it very carefully. We'll release one album a year. We'll make sure it's not in line with any of the individual things going on." And they did. And they did it in spite of the label, because the label wasn't necessarily, up for it. But they finally realized, you're going to get it whether you like it or not. And so they did. And it was very successful. And they became the Diamond Duet. And they started winning all the awards year after year. And yes, they did win the Duo of the Year. They won Grammys for it. They won, everything for it that you can come up with. And they were the most awarded duet for years. But yeah, it was very successful. And one night he would go out first and she would close the show. And then the next night they would rotate and he would close the show. And then after they finished the show, the last person, they would call back up the other and they would do their duets, and then the whole building would explode. It was crazy. I mean, to see that was, now that you could get a pretty big wow, feeling. And we did get to go to a lot of those shows, but it was something to have a front row seat to see.
Did he open with "Hello, Darling" for the rest of his career?
No, he actually did later in the show, up until I don't even remember what year it was that he thought, that's how I need to open my show. He was into the 80s for sure. Okay. Probably early 80s maybe. And so what he would do, and it was magic, but it would be like blackout except the spotlight on a mirror ball that was spinning. And then you could see these searchlights, of spotlights going back and forth across the room. And you hear this big C chord, and he starts singing, "People see us everywhere." And the band's up there and they hit the next chord, and then they think you really care. But myself, I can't deceive. Boom, 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 boom. And then Pork Chop, his drummer, who was with him through the rock years and the country years, he said, "And now, one of the best friends a song ever had." My mama tagged that one on him. "Conway Twitty, 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 Twitty." It would do that little echo thing, and he would come out and they would be playing the big fanfare, power chords and stuff. And then they would just go, stop it. And the spotlight would hit him and he'd say, "Hello, darling." Yeah. And oh my gosh, that's when the whole place would go nuts again,
So that was early 80s when that, because I knew that exact intro, which you're talking about. I've watched it. I've seen it several times. But so that song, he didn't start "Hello, Darling" first song until early 80s.
I'm guessing, but I think that's about right. I think that sounds right, but
he finished his career though every year doing that opening with the "Hello, Darling."
He did. And he always closed with "It's Only Make Believe," because that was his biggest record ever. And
but he done that teaser of it at the beginning to just the band.
To
get into "Hello,"
Yes, exactly. That's awesome. That's what opened it. And then he, when he would come back in toward at the end of the show, he would, start saying, "My one and only bum, 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 bum," and he would go into the song there, instead of just, starting back over with "The people see us everywhere." He would go into the song like he had already sang that part. So now he's finishing it.
That's awesome.
Oh, it was magic. It was magic. He had one of the most powerful shows. And I've been to a lot of people's shows. And even since, I'm talking huge artists. And I thought, they don't have that thing. I mean, it's not that they weren't good, but I'm talking about the crowd response. I'm telling you what, Charles and Jeremy, the building would shake. In some towns where he was like extremely huge, the whole building would rock. You could feel it vibrating from the noise. It was crazy. And to sit there, it would take your breath away every time it happened.
And I hate to make this reference again, but it's got that feeling of Elvis kind of thing. And even what the band was playing right there after he did the, people see us everywhere. And then they start playing, it almost sounded like that, what Elvis they play at the beginning when he came out. It almost had that feel, but it was more magical. It was more hair raising with him, the stuff he would say, and then doing the Hello Darling. It was just more hair raising,
Yeah. Well, I got to see Elvis a few times, and I got to meet him, and that was pretty cool. But that was magic too. But he had that huge orchestra and 8 singers, and it was magic. There's no question, it was magic. There's just a few shows that I've been to that affect me like that, and another one's the Eagles. When I got to see them, I saw them their last tour before they quit touring, when they played Nashville. And then I saw them on their Hell Freezes Over tour when they came back out. And I was a huge Eagles fan, but Lord have mercy, they're talented. And it was magic. I mean, it wasn't that kind of power thing like Dad and Elvis had, but it was just solid. Sure. Every song was magic. It sounded like records playing up there. It was just so good, so good. So anyway, but yeah, there's not many people that have that kind of impact out there, and can bring a crowd to their knees. I mean, to the point where they feel like he's talking to me. He's talking to me directly. He could communicate with 20,000 people, making each one of them feel like that song was just for them, and that's a gift. That's a gift. You don't just, I get up there and do my little thing. And of course, Don't Cry Joni was magic, but I know why, it's because Dad was on the record. But, and he would give me credit. He'd say, no, it's because you were on the record. But it wasn't. I mean, I could go out there and do a show and I didn't affect people like that. But
do you think that song would have had the impact that it had if it wouldn't have been his teenage daughter? You know what I mean?
It probably wouldn't have got flipped over out of curiosity and then took off. I mean, who knows? It's hard to say what ifs because we don't know. All we know is what was.
There's a lot of intrigue there being
his daughter.
Yeah.
And her name's Joni.
Well, yeah, exactly. Joni Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean... It just worked. But it was a gift. It was a gift. And I'll always treasure that gift, and I still get paid royalties on it. That's how much it still sells. Crazy. I can count how many years ago that was. Well, it actually came out in 75. So y'all do the math. It's way over my head.
That's 40. That's
47.
46 years. 47. Yeah, 47 now.
It'll be in October, I guess, when it came out. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm 40 and I was born in 81.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So it has been 40. Oh man, I'm old. I'm gonna be on Medicare this year. So.
Well. When did you meet John?
My husband? Yeah. In 1976, I was married to my kid's dad, Chris, and I was a young new recording artist. Don't Cry Joni was already out, and I was on my dad and Loretta's booking agency called United Talent. They booked me, and my Aunt Jean called me because I had this bedroom suit for sale. And she said, you still got that little white bedroom suit for sale? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, there's this young couple that's moving back to Hendersonville and they're looking for a bedroom suit for their daughter. I said, oh, really? And she said, yeah, you may know who he is. And I said, well, who is it? And she said, John Wesley Rowell. I said, well, duh, Aunt Jean. He's all over the radio. He's having major hits all over the place. Of course I know who he is, And she said, well, they want a bedroom suit for their daughter. She's like 9 years old. And I said, oh, okay. So they came to our house. And it was the first time we'd ever met. And we were on the same booking agency, the same record label, and, had never met before. So they came in, they bought my bedroom seat. Their daughter, Jamie, grew up on my bedroom seat. And he and Janice, his wife, were married for 28 years. And then she died of cancer. And my dear friend LaDonna called me one day, and this was in 2001. Right before 9/11 happened. And she called me. She said, I've got the perfect man for you. I said, there is no perfect man for me. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to find him, And she said, no, this guy, he's a great guy. And she said, and you may have heard of him. And I said, who is it? And she said, John Wesley Reynolds. I said, oh my gosh. And I told her the story. And she said, I'm playing tonight at the Hall of Fame. Why don't you come down there? And I'll, kind of set you guys up. I said, oh, no. I said, here's what we'll do. I'll come down there. He's going to be there. He's going to be there. So all you need to do is just introduce us. And if there's anything there, it'll happen naturally. I don't want him to feel pressured or obligated. Yeah. It's awkward. And she said, that's a great idea. So I came in and John came in and he was sitting at a table there, and she comes over and she said, there's John. I said, I know, I see him. And she said, well, come on. My cousin was with me. He's a famous songwriter. Have you ever heard the song Somebody Lied by Ricky Van Shelton?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My cousin wrote that. My cousin wrote it. But he was with me. And so we went over there, and I think Larry stayed seated, but LaDonna and I went over to John, and she said, John, I want to introduce you to somebody. And he turns around and he looks at me. Of course, back when I met him, I had real long, like down to my waist, blonde hair. Of course it was natural. Not. But anyway, and that, of course now I'm dark headed. This is my natural color. And it was a lot darker back then because I didn't have as much gray. But she said, this is Joni. He said, you didn't have to tell me who she was. I know that face anywhere. He said, I remember her from 1976. He remembered me. And I was like, oh my gosh, And we were just drawn together. It was like a magnet and meant to be, yes. And we stayed together for about, I forgot how many months it was. And then he started getting that freaked out feeling like, I'm getting too many feelings here. I don't know if I'm ready for this yet, because I just, buried my wife a couple of years ago. And so he kind of like bailed on me. And I thought, broke my heart in two. And I thought, you know what? Here's the way to look at it. And I even wrote him a letter. And I said, John, if it's God's will for us to be together, there's nothing you can do to stop it. So if it's supposed to be, we'll find our way back to each other. And in 2005, I was on a big workout program. I was working out every day. And my nephew was my trainer and really great fitness trainer. And I was down there, and I finished doing the weights, and I was on the treadmill, doing my hour on the treadmill, and my phone rings, and I answered it, and it was John. He said, Joni, and I said, yeah. I was like, oh my gosh. And I hadn't heard from him. This was like from 2001 to 2005, right? And he said, I would like to take you to dinner. And I said, okay, when? And he said, I thought he'd say next week or something. He said, well, I just finished with the session. I can be there in about 30 minutes. I said, oh my gosh. So I told Ryan, my nephew, I said, I got to go. And I lived right here. Kathy lived here in the same gated community that my mom and I lived in. And so I run as fast as I can to my house. And in 30 minutes, I shower, I dry my hair, I put on makeup, put on a little cute dress, and was there at the door by the time he got here. And ever since then, we've been together. I mean, it's just been like magic again, So we got married, and we've been married for 16 and a half years.
That's awesome.
Great.
Yeah. So he tried to get away from me, but it wasn't God's plan.
Now, okay, yeah, before we go there, I want to ask you about because we're at that, getting close to that 80 mark, 81.
Yeah.
And when Conway fell on the bus and hit his head, several people have said that his personality changed a lot at that point, drastically. Yeah. And I remember you telling me on the phone about him grabbing the remote control and punching on it, thinking it was the wireless phone.
Yeah, exactly.
And you said he would get frustrated at a lot of things and stuff.
He'd forget the words to his songs, and he'd be trying to, make a sentence, and he'd get like you could tell he was frustrated. And we didn't put all this together until years later, but during that time period, well, okay, let's go to 81. They had just gotten done with the tour in, I don't know where they were playing, but they got back to Hendersonville at Twitty City. We built Twitty City. We had just moved in there. My mom was at the house. She stayed home, and Dad was getting off the bus, and he turned around. He told the guys, hey guys, I'll see y'all next week. We had an ice storm, and I don't think he realized how bad it was. And he had on boots, and he stepped off the bottom step of the bus, and both his feet like flew out from under him. And when they did, the back of his head hit that steel step. The bus steps are made out of steel. And I remember John Huey that played steel guitar for him. He said it sounded like a gunshot going off.
That's what I heard.
He said, I realized it was your dad. And I thought, oh, he's not going to be alive when we get up there. And so Dad, kind of rolled over, and he said, I'm all right. And they said, are you sure? And he said, yeah, I'll be all right. So he gets in his car and drives back to Mom and Dad's house there at Twitty City. And he comes in and he wakes my mom up. He said, Mick, I want to tell you about what happened. And he told her the story, and she said, are you sure you don't need to go to the hospital? I'll take you to the hospital. He said, no, I'll be all right. She said, well, you need to stay awake. Let's make sure you're okay. Well, it wasn't obvious at the time, but there were little subtle things that were starting to happen. It wasn't like, boom, here's something going on. It wasn't like that. But these changes started happening. And one thing he did is he called my mom in 85, and he adored my mother, adored her. And he said, you need to go. Jimmy and his wife had moved to Florida in Miami area, down that way, because Jimmy played pro golf, or he wanted to go into pro golf. He was assistant pro. And he said, I want you to go down there and spend some time with Jimmy and his wife. He said, I've got some things I need to figure out. And Mama was just crushed. She said, why is he sending me away? And then about a year later, she gets a friend of theirs that was a friend. Dad had gone to the Dominican Republic and gotten a divorce from my mom, and gave her the papers, and she didn't even have to know about it. They presented it to her when she got home, and we were all like, what? I mean, it just blew everybody away. And that was one of those things. He was hiring people that had been with him for years, and dear friends that he treasured, and their families, and just doing things that were totally out of character. And it wasn't until years later, after we went through the big estate battle, my mom called me one day, and she said, I was watching a TV show. And she said, I want you to come over here because I want to talk about it with you. And I did. And I went over there to Mom. She just lived right around the corner. She just, passed in October. But anyway, I went over there, and she said, I saw the show. It was a medical thing. And they were talking about people who take a hard lick to the back of their head, talking about sports, basically, is where it's, where the story started, with how sports related head injuries are changing these people dramatically. And they said, especially if you take a blow to the back of the head, they said, what'll happen is it like breaks millions of these little tiny capillaries and blood vessels that run into the lining of your brain. And it puts pressure on your brain in the judgment part. And you'll see a dramatic personality change, kind of like when people have strokes or some kind of car accident, where they're dramatically different. And they said that's what'll happen. And they said years later, it'll eventually slowly absorb all that blood back into the bloodstream, and it'll maybe start coming back a little bit. And that's what was going on at the end of Dad's life. I remember the step monster, that's all I'll call her. She said that she would come out at 2:00 in the morning, and Dad would be sitting in the dark by himself in another room. And what he was doing, he was calling these people at 2:00 in the morning, because she tried to control everything. But he would go in there and he would call them, and he'd say, I'm leaving. I miss Mick, and all these things. My mom went by Mickey to people that knew her later in life, but in growing up, she was Mick. And so anyway, that's, kind of how that all happened. That's how a woman like her, snuck into his world,
You wrote your dad a letter about her.
I did.
Basically, and I don't know what the letter said or not, but just in a nutshell, I think from what I heard there was, it was about her, and you saying, I would accept her if it's what you really want. And that's what you...
I did. I thought, I don't know if I can say this to him, but I can sure write it down. And I had a little bit of his gift of being able to write things, and so I wrote him a really sweet letter, and I said, if you love her, I will find a level to love her on. And she can't be all bad if you love her, So I tried to accept her. I mean, it's the only thing I could do. It's just like, what if, when you married your wife and your whole family was against it? I mean, they would have to find a way to accept your wife. And I'm not saying this happened to you, but I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Right. And you're still going to love your wife and you're still going to marry her, but your family's either going to have to get on board or accept the fact that you won't be around as much. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where we were with her. And so that's why I wrote the letter. And I found it in his stuff after he passed. And so it meant a lot to me that he still had it, Well,
I tell you what, we'll just say this, even though it was a long period of time, it was 13 years. We won't drag you through all of that again. There is a documentary on YouTube. It was on TV. It's called The Wheel. If you wanted to go back and see all of that and stories and sides and this, that, and the other, because we want to get on to happy things in this podcast. But
yeah, just keep in mind now, honey, this is not reality the way they edited it, put it together. Nobody knows the story like we do. The people don't realize that there was an auction. First of all, Dad had a will. He left everything to his children. And the words he told us out of his own mouth was, I have a prenuptial agreement that we entered into prior to our marriage. The prenuptial will take care of my children in the event of my death. And the life insurance policies I had for her will take care of her outside of the estate. And she won't be privy to the estate, basically, is what he's saying. And this, I don't mind if you put on there, but when we go to the reading of the will, this is the impression we have, is the prenuptial will keep everything, straight in line. And then all of a sudden they say, well, since there wasn't a prenuptial, and we said, what? I mean, we were shocked. And they said, no, there wasn't a prenuptial. And I said, yes, there was. And they argued with us, no. Well, you don't have to present a prenuptial to a court in order to make it valid. You just sign it between the two parties. As long as they're both represented, that's all you have to worry about. And then it's not a document that gets registered at the courthouse. It just, remains between the two people. And one of the executors, the one that my dad grew up with, that he took care of and gave a job to, was one of the co-executors. And we thought, well, he'll protect us. He'll bring that prenuptial out of the safe that, Dad had to give him a copy in the office. And before Dad died, the stepmonster was trying to get rid of Hugh Carden because she wanted everybody out of the way that had any power. And he was now the president of Conway Twitty Enterprises, and she wanted him gone. So she was doing everything she could to set him up, right? Well, the day Daddy died, and I told you Reba McEntire had sent her plane, and she ended up bringing us back on the plane. And I was in the back with her, and she was crying. She said, well, at least you're going to get to keep your home. So I'm going to lose my home. And I said, well, we're not going to let that happen to you. We'll do everything we can to help you. We will. And I said, Dad would want us to help you. That's who he was. And we will help you, because we were going to get everything, right? And she spoke like we were going to get everything on that plane. And the next thing we know, at the reading of the will, they tell us that it's vanished. And we said, well, wait a minute. So then we started remembering back to when Dad found out that one of the co-executors was embezzling from him, right? And that made him at odds with her. And they didn't even speak. I mean, they would not even be in the same area together, because he knew what she was doing, trying to get rid of him. And she was trying to get rid of him and wanted him gone, right? And when we come back off the plane, I went to my grandmother's house, because she lived there on the grounds at Twitty City. And it was my dad's mother. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got to go in here and comfort Mama. And this is going to break my heart. And I walked in. Of course, I hadn't been to bed in 2 days. And, I fell in her lap, and she sat there and stroked my hair while I cried, And so she ended up comforting me. But he had just been on a month tour. So, there was a lot of money. And, he had a lot of money before that, because he just built a $3 million house. And so it wasn't like he was, out of money. He couldn't be. There was a lot. There was a lot there that was suddenly disappeared. And so we had to quick sell the bus that he collapsed on. We had to quick sell it really fast just to pay the band the last week's check. Wow. And that broke my heart. These guys had been with him. I think the newest one had only been with him for about a year, because Pork Chop, the drummer he had from rock and roll years on, he had just died 6 weeks before my dad. He had diabetes, and he died of complications from that. But anyway, the rest of them had been with him for years and years and years and years. And he was very loyal to his people, his band, because they all lived together basically on the road, and they got along great. They had a great relationship. But anyway, so we had to quick sell the bus just to pay their last check. And it killed us not to be able to give them a bonus. But hey, first thing they did was, because Twitty City was still open and had crowds coming through. And we were all on a salary. We were considered part of the attraction. And that's what we lived on. And it wasn't, we weren't getting millions of dollars a year or anything, but a very comfortable little living, to be there, stay there, and be a part of the draw that brought people to Twitty City, because it was a family place. And so anyway, the first thing they did was shut off our salaries, shut off my dad's sister's salary. She was at one of the managers of at the gift shop, got rid of her. hired their own relatives, gave themselves raises, and everything, the whole world changed. So here we were, we didn't even know how we were going to pay our next electric bill, because they shut us off, and we inherited everything. And Kathy and I started going, wait a minute, we want the executors removed. And we went before the judge, and in our dad's will, it said that if one or all of my children, my heirs, want the executors removed and replaced, they can.
You even said so yourself before. They ended up winning, by the way. Let's go to that. The truth always comes out, and the truth sets you free. And they ended up winning. They got the full estate and
the intellectual property.
The intellectual property, correct. And she ended up getting the home.
She got those things. Those things passed outside the estate, which we already knew she was going to get. We accepted that,
Correct.
But the thing she wanted big time, she wanted to deplete the accounts enough to where there wouldn't be enough money at the end of the day for us to satisfy her share of the intellectual property. That's another thing about the estate sale I forgot to say was, we said, okay, we had an appraisal done. Let us just pay you the value. Even though you're not really, truly supposed to get this, we will give you that money, to pay for what the appraisal brought. And she said, I will not accept the appraisal. I want everything sold to the highest bidder. And we had to sit there and watch our life be sold away.
Yeah, there was even love letters, dude. Love letters from their mom in Conway back and forth when they were seeing each other and
well, he was in Europe. He was in Europe, and they were married, and he wrote her.
They were selling this shit, to people.
They sold my mom and dad's.
That's beyond heartless.
It is.
It was unbelievable, dude.
Their marriage and divorce papers. They sold them.
Now you told me that the auctioneer actually had a soft spot for you guys because he thought it was wrong what was going on. And when y'all would just throw up, a small amount of money for something that he thought was yours anyways, he would say sold and wouldn't allow nobody else to bid on it.
That was, we refused to play the game. I mean, well, first of all, we had to hold on to our money because we had a lot of fights ahead of us, so we couldn't be out there foolishly spending money. But when it came time for our mom and dad's divorce and marriage license, we said, that's private. That doesn't belong in anyone else's hands. And we tried to outbid her on the love letter from my dad to my mom. And she bid so high, we couldn't outbid her, but and the auctioneer saw that happen. And when it was time for the marriage and divorce papers, Cappy and I stood up with our little letters and said $100. And he said, sold. He didn't give anybody else a chance to say a word. And he sold it. There were 3 documents altogether. So it was $300. And then we had a dear friend that we had first moved to Hendersonville, met. His name was Jay Jackson. And after it was over, he came up to me and he said, here. And he took his hand and he took my hand and he put $300 in my hand. And I said, oh no, Jay, no. He said, I insist no one should have to pay for their mom and dad's marriage and divorce papers. He said, that broke my heart, and I am not letting you pay for it. And he was so kind, and we've remained friends today. He's just a nice man. His wife passed away just a couple years ago, but we've been friends since I first started coming to Hendersonville. Known him a long time. I told you I was so shy and quiet, and it just wasn't nothing about me was scrappy. I wasn't the type that could get back up in their face. Kathy's little bitty thing. She's probably 4'9.5", 4'10", maybe. She says she is, but I didn't question it. But anyway, she's just a little bitty thing, and she gets up in people's face. She's not afraid of anybody. She reminds me of a little pit bull, But I was never like that. I was the little meek, mild, tenderhearted kind of person.
So was she saying from the start, hey, we're being taken through the ringer?
Oh, yeah. She said it before Dad died. I mean, Kathy hated her and made no bones about it, and she knew it. And she was working on getting Dad not to like Kathy by planting seeds in his mind and, trying to do things because she considered Kathy a threat.
A threat. She knew she was up to no good. Okay. Yeah.
Well, she knew Kathy was up to exposing the truth. Oh,
well,
yeah.
No. I'm saying Kathy knew Dee was up to no good even from the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it was obvious to all of us. But I went along with the game because I love my dad. I told you that. Kathy ended up going along with it much better than she first started out. But anyway, they didn't get along. But I was just so easygoing, and that's why they didn't see me coming. I was back there doing all these things and helping write the briefs and I didn't physically write them, but I would tell them, here's what we need in it, to cover. And I remember all the facts and everything about the story, and gave the lawyers everything they needed to get us to the end, the ultimate end where we ended up. But, her goal was to make sure there wasn't enough money for her to get the election, for us to be able to give her the intellectual property, right? The value of it, because there wouldn't be enough money. So she would end up with the intellectual. Well, since you can't afford to pay my share of it, then I'll just take the property in kind, like take the intellectual property. And that's where they were headed. And we would have ended up with zero if that had happened. So luckily, the biggest mistake she ever made was trying to have Daddy's body exhumed and cremated, because it turned the tides not only for the public, but for the judge and everybody. I mean, the judge started, whoa, I don't want to go down this road. So, we started changing his mind a little bit, even though we lost on most things. When they finally got to the end where it was time to determine the widow's share, they gave us a number and they said, here it is. And we've calculated, and this is what her share will end up being. And this is what you're going to have to pay her for her to go away. And I said, whoa, good gosh almighty. I said, how did it get so high? How in the world? And they said, well, it is what it is. And I went home and I thought, I'm not accepting this. So my thinking tank was the bathtub. I'd get in the bathtub and I'd lay there and just relax. And, all these thoughts would come into my brain, and I know Daddy was coming in there telling me how to do this, But I finally came back. I said, wait a minute. In order to value the intellectual property rights, they get a company to do that. And what they do is they take a 3-year average of the royalties. They come up with the average between the 3 years, and then they do a projection up to 20 years, right? And every year after a certain point, the number will start declining, because normally there's a decline that happens. And so that's how they would come up with a number or they did in our case, to figure out the intellectual property value. And so I said, wait a minute. So I called Brenda. She lived around the corner from me. She was one of our attorneys. And I called her. I said, Brenda, I think that I figured out what's wrong here. And she said, what? I said, can I come tell you? I'll bring chocolate. And she said, yes, because she loved chocolate. So I brought a bowl of chocolate to her and I said, here it is. I think because they're not only giving her the value of, that 20-year projection for the income that would be coming in, they're also giving her the income that is coming in. So that's what's got it so inflated. And she said, oh my gosh, that's double dipping. I said, yeah, they're paying her for the same asset twice, her portion of it. Mm-hmm. And it made $1 million difference to us. And so we called the attorney, Charlie, our other attorney said, Charlie, He said, I think it's a loser. And Brenda said, I don't care. I'm going to go. I'm going to make the record. I'm going to stand up. Even if the judge throws it out, I'm going to keep talking and get it down on and make sure there's a court reporter. So she did. And we went to court the next day. And of course, Judge Gray, not well founded. He threw it. He said, no. And she said, I don't care, Your Honor. I'm making the case. So when it goes up on the appellate level, we can have our case made, our record made. And so he didn't have a choice then. And so when they finally got to the point of going to the appellate court for determining her fair share, when you go to the appeals court, you only have 30 minutes to argue, and you have a limited amount of paper space that you can write your written argument, right? So you better be sure when you file something, whatever you file, you pick your best things. And we had 13 years of this. So we had to pick and choose, what to put in there to make sure we didn't extend our time and lose something important. So we sat down with our attorneys and our CPA and Kathy and I, and we were in the conference room. And it's okay, what do we want to put in here? I said, I want the double dipping issue. And our male attorney, Charlie, said, oh, no, you're going to lose on that. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. I said, I don't give a crap. I'm paying for it. I'd learned to become assertive at this point. I said, I want it in there. And Brenda said, I agree. I think it's a great idea. So we go to the appellate, and we picked the other things too, but we went to the appellate court, and Brenda gets up and she says, I'm going to argue this part because I believe so strongly in it. And Charlie said, that's fine. So she gets up there and she argues it. And you know how I told you earlier that if an attorney, if a heir has an attorney, they don't receive the paperwork, it goes directly to the attorney's office. But if you don't have an attorney, like my brothers, they didn't have an attorney, even though they joined with us and agreed with us, they didn't pay an attorney and they weren't represented, they were called pro se. And so the paperwork would go directly to them from the court. So we had been to the appellate court. We were waited and waited and waited and waited. It was about a month later, I guess. And it was Father's Day. And this sounds like it could be a book. It's so amazing how this all played out. But it was Father's Day. And my brother had just moved, Jimmy. And he went to his old address to pick up their mail because they hadn't had it forwarded yet. And he called us. It was on a Sunday, obviously. And he said, Joni, I think we have the appellate court order, ruling. I said, oh my gosh. I said, well, let me get a chain phone call going here. So we got, everybody on three-way call. You three-way this one, you three that. So we got everybody on the line at once. And back then that was hard to do, technologically, but we did it. And so Jimmy opens up the paper. He waits till we all get on the line, and he opens it up and he starts reading it. Not only did we win on that double dipping issue, they made it state law. So that can never happen to another family. And,
Wow.
New York. Yeah, so it was really cool. And so it changed the law. It changed the law. My little bathtub, thinking tank helped me come up with that whole deal. And it changed everything for us. Everything. It was cool.
And the fact that you guys got, control of the whole estate and,
when just so you understand that when you say estates close, when you're in a battle or even in a will, in a normal will, estates close, and then they distribute out the property at the end to the new people. And when we got the intellectual property rights,
yeah.
Yes. So I just want to help.
So all right, now Family Guy uses Conway Twitty all the time.
Yeah.
For a lot of this newer generation is going to know about Family Guy,
Yeah. they had to
And-
get permission.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And they have to pay to do that, you know,
They-
every,
Yeah, in fact, the producer, the big producer of the show, called me and said, you know, and I didn't watch Family Guy, but
yeah.
I'd heard of it, you know, and I heard this, you know, basically what it was about. And so she called and she said, we want to put your dad in an episode. And I said, oh no, not if it's going to make fun of him. I don't want to in any way harm his image or reputation. You know, if it's not going to be done in a classy way, we're not. She said, are you kidding? She said, Seth loves your dad.
That's the way it seems. Yeah. He just says, hey, now here's some Conway Twitty, and then it'll just go to Conway for, you know, a couple of minutes.
That's why we agreed to it. Then they wanted to put him in a video game, and it got to I didn't like the Star Wars one. That was one of their big shows where they put the helmet on him and all that. I didn't. To me, that looked. I know. We didn't care for that much.
I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm sitting here thinking of all the crazy stuff out there that Conway Twitty is used for. You know,
it was one of their. Well, they had to get permission, you know, to use it at the time. And I didn't understand they were going to put a Star Wars like Darth Vader head on him. And we didn't like that. So we finally said, let's pull back. They even wanted to, they said, he's our biggest artist. I mean, we get more response from Conway Twitty than any other major artist that we have represented on here. Mm-hmm. And they said, we want to make him one of the little characters in one of the new video game that they were having. What are they called? Whatever they call them. Anyway, with a little character like Maury, you know. And by then, my brother and sister, Kathy and Jimmy, were like, we're not signing off. And we all have to sign off. I mean, at least the majority of us do. So I thought, no, it's not worth fighting. I would probably could have made a lot of money with it, but I wouldn't want to. And I didn't think that could be disrespectful the way they were going to do it. But they just were over it. They said, he's been tied to Family Guy long enough. Let's move on. Yeah.
Well, the fact that he's being remembered, I mean, even in these newer whatever, he's being remembered and revered and, you know, classy ain't what it used to be. I'll say that, no matter what show or music or, I mean, obviously when you look at music now. And,
I dropped the phone. My little thing fell over. There we go.
That's awesome.
Good catch. You saw my bare feet. But anyway, we've gotten to do a lot of things. It wasn't long ago, we were working with Universal Music Group, and I told you we've gotten to be real friendly with them, and I adore them. The president, Cindy, and Gary, that I work with all the time. Nice people, great people, and they love Dad. And, you know, they weren't even alive. Well, about your age, you know, maybe a little bit older than you. But so they weren't very old when he died. You know, they don't remember. They weren't at the heads of the label at that point. But anyway, we did a movie thing where they really liked that story about the Lincoln in space, you know, with the Russian "Hello, darling" and all that. Cindy, when I told her that story, she said, "Oh my Lord, do you know how big that would be if that happened today with all the multimedia stuff, you know, I mean, massive media?" She said, "It would be unbelievable how big that story would be." And she said, "We need to do a movie around this. I mean, it is so powerful." She said, "How many people can tell that story?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's true." So I got to go out and meet General Stafford. He was like in his late 80s by this time, and I got to go interview him. And MCA sent a film crew with me to go out and interview him, and it was the coolest thing. Oh my gosh, I was sitting there with this astronaut that had been out of space multiple times, and he was huge, and it was just really awesome. It was one of the neatest things I've ever got to do. But anyway, they were doing a movie about Dad's life, and they got this guy from Canada that did movie scripts, and they hired him, paid him a lot of money. And the guy came here, met with us, interviewed us, spent the day with my mom, who knew the whole story, and then I know it's second best. And, Kathy and Jimmy and Mike all know a lot, but I really remember a lot of those details. And anyway, we get the script back. It was like, oh my gosh, who is he talking about? He has Dad coming up on Music Row in a convertible Cadillac with a cowboy hat on and a bandana. I was going, have you ever seen my dad? I mean, that is so not my dad, never wore a cowboy hat, ever. It was just, there wasn't one thing about any of it that was correct.
Yeah.
Nothing. So we said, I called Gary. I said, Gary, I mean, I didn't get through page 1. And I called him, the guy at Universal. I said, we can't do this. And he said, Joni, promise me you'll just finish reading it before you make any more comments. I said, well, I can tell you, I will read it, but I'm already getting vicious phone calls from my siblings going, no, this ain't happening. And I said, so nobody's happy with it. So finally, after I read it, we all got on the powwow call, and I said, Gary, none of this is true. He said, oh, really? He said, well, I don't know your story like y'all do. I said, there's nothing about it that's real. And I said, and it's not pretty. It's not in a positive light. So no. So they pulled it down. So he said, we're not going to dismiss the idea of a movie. We're just going to let it go for right now. This just happened like back in the fall. And so one day we're going to get a movie out about his life, and hopefully it'll lift him up into the place he deserves to be.
What is y'all's favorite Conway songs? That's what I want to know.
Well, Don't Cry Joni. No, I'm teasing.
I had heard Don't Cry Joni before, but I didn't. I guess I was,
put it together. Yeah.
I was more of the 80s Conway for some reason. I guess because of my age,
Yeah. I love That's My Job. I love How Much More Can She Stand? Yeah. Y'all got to listen to some of the older stuff too, because that, oh my gosh, he did a version of She Thinks I Still Care. Not the,
wow.
He did 2 versions, but the one I'm talking about was on the Twitty album. It was called Twitty. And oh my gosh, he sang the crap out of it. He sang Born to Lose. You remember that old song, that blues song?
It's been a while, but I've listened back through some of those old ones. Just
okay.
Check it out.
I love I See the Want To in Your Eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful song. And of course,
you're gonna take them all.
Goodbye Time. Oh
yeah, Goodbye Time's awesome. She took one of mine.
I know.
Don't
Goodbye Time,
cowboy.
Yeah, I love.
That's a fun one. I guess Slow Hand. I don't know. It'd be hard.
Yeah. Slow
Hand. His version of The Rose was magical.
Yeah. Crazy in Love.
Yeah, Crazy in Love. That was a great one.
I love Crazy in Love.
I had so many, it's hard to like zero in.
I Want to Know You.
We
really
did
is, because it's unfair to pick some, because
it is.
I'd have to go back and look at a list to even remember how many great ones there was,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you could go on for 2 hours just on the great songs. But
sure.
Let me tell you what. Back in 2006, we got a manager that was going to help us get some new projects going and things, things that we hadn't tried and didn't know how to make happen. And so he said, have you all ever thought about, there was a play that used to play here at the Ryman called Always Patsy, and it was the Patsy Cline story, right? It was here for years and it did really well. I mean, just sold out, sold out, sold out. And he said, I know the director of that. And would y'all be interested in doing something like a musical about your dad? And I said, well, yeah, let's check it out. Let's see about it. So we meet the guy, Randy, he's the director, and he kind of put the whole thing together basically. And we said, well, we got to find a Conway. I said, that's not going to be easy because nobody's down like that. I mean, first of all, they got to have the range, but they got to have that sound. He had a very unique sound. And you hear a lot of people that copy Haggard and Jones, and they're easy to emulate, but and they're my favorites. I mean, they're awesome. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything negative, but people can imitate their sound pretty easily, right? But they have a hard time with Dad. And so anyway, we decided to hold auditions. So we go out to LA and Vegas. We thought there'd be some talented people there. And then we were going to have one in Nashville, right? That's where the 3 auditions were going to be held. So in the meantime, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, and I thought, I went with my husband to the studio one day when he was doing background vocals on somebody that wasn't famous, but he still was doing backgrounds because he loved the guy who produced it. And he said, yeah, I'll do it. So I went with him. And this guy named Glenn Templeton was the singing. And he went out there and he was doing his part. And I said, oh my gosh, he sounds like Dad. The inflections, I mean, it's crazy. And he wasn't trying to sound like him, you know, he was just singing his thing. And I thought, Lord have mercy. You can hear that same timbre in his voice, and everything was so similar to Dad. And so when we were talking about doing these auditions, I asked John, my husband, I said, do you think Glenn would be interested in auditioning? And he said, I don't know, but it's worth asking. He said, why don't you give him a call? He'd probably get a kick out of you calling him. And I said, oh gosh. So I called him and I said, Glenn, this is John Wesley Ryle's wife. And he was very nice. And I said, Dad was Conway, and we are going to do a musical about his life. And we were wondering, would you be interested? I know you got your own thing going, but would you be interested in coming and auditioning? He said, heck yeah. So we, go to Los Angeles, and we heard some great talent out there. And they really loved, the songs that they were bringing in to do. They just got such a kick out of it. They were young. And these kids probably could have made it acceptable, to sound like Dad. But they were great singers. I'm talking about top notch. And then we went to Vegas and we heard this other guy that was, superb singer. And I thought, oh man, we could work with him and get him going too. But I kept telling Randy, the director, I said, I think our Conway's coming to the Nashville audition. His name is Glenn. And he said, really? He said, well, pull him up on Facebook or whatever. And it's Facebook. And he did. And Glenn has blue eyes and long, shaggy blonde hair. So he looks nothing like my dad. And I said, well, he doesn't look anything like him. And he said, that can be fixed. We can work with that, He said, if he's as good as you say, then we might have something going here. So we had all these people go through, even my little nephew Trey auditioned, and bless his heart, I love him. But once Glenn came out and he pulled up a stool and he had just an acoustic guitar and he did That's My Job, and everybody's jaws went bam on the ground. I mean, it was magic. It was like Dad. He was really trying to sound like Dad then. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then we were looking for the Loretta. And this young girl from Kentucky comes out. Her name's Emily Portman. At the time, she was Portman. she comes out and she sang Loretta. And I swear to you, it sounded like Loretta Lynn. And I've heard Loretta sing my whole life, you know, basically. And it was crazy. So we got them to sing, you know, the Conway and Loretta. And it was like, what the heck's happening here? It was that good. I mean, it blew us away. And I used to spend countless hours in the studio with my dad. So I know his voice inside, upside down. I mean, every way, you know.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, hell, this is it, you know. So we obviously got both of them to agree to do I mean, they wanted to be a part of the musical. And I sent everything I could think of to Glenn. I said, here's the early country, here's the middle country, here's the late country, here's interviews. I want you to hear the inflections of how he says things. You know, just study him, study, and learn how he pronounces words. And it's going to be good. And I'm not kidding you. It was like Dad possessed his body and came out and sang, he did I Want to Know You Before We Make Love. Oh my Lord. And I may never
that's what Hank Jr. does to J-Rob's body.
Well, this was eerie. I'm not kidding you. As his child sitting there and thinking, that sounds too much like my dad. It's weird. And then we bought we went out to LA and got wigs made. That was similar to Dad's hair. And then my mom, who used to do beauty school, she knew how he wore it. She knew how to style it. So she finished, you know, doing the rest of it. And when they would backlight him and he would do that little thing, you know, with the microphone, it was eerie. I'm not kidding you. And then we had there's a big Tennessee Performing Arts Center here in Nashville that all the big things go to. We decided to have our opening night for our world opening, you know, premiere. And we had Loretta's band there, all of Loretta's people. All my dad's band was there, and tons of people. George Jones was there. I mean, all these people were there. Crystal Gale was there. And when it was over, they were so blown away. And when Dad and Loretta, they said it was like a dang record playing up there. We couldn't tell it wasn't Conway and Loretta. And then all the stuff with Dad. I mean, he had the early rock and roll stuff before Daddy was Conway Twitty. He had the rock and roll, It's Only Make Believe stuff. And the way we had it laid out, it was so powerful. I mean, it was just the coolest musical. And we did it up until when y'all may not even remember, but in 2008, when the economy just like, it started in 7, and then it really was bad in 8. And it was just too expensive for us to even take the thing out on the road. I mean, it cost us $22,000 just to leave town. And that was just to get out the door because it was a big show. And you had to make way above that to even break even, you know. So anyway, we finally decided, okay, another day. We'll do it another day. But it was magic. I'm not kidding you. It was the coolest that I've ever got to sit through, you know, with somebody sounding so much like Dad that it tricked me.
There's somebody we haven't talked about though, real quick. Speaking of artists, and Glenn Templeton, I actually saw that on YouTube, him doing That's My Job, and I thought it was really good. I heard that.
But when it was in character, it was way better. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it was. Go ahead.
We had this guy on the podcast, and he talked about Conway a lot, and he talked about his album. I'm going to show you a text message I just sent him Saturday. And I said, "Hey, Hoss, wanted to tell you we met and hung out for a while with Joni Lee at our show in Kentucky last weekend. She's going to be on the podcast next week as well. Awesome lady." He said, "She's a beautiful spirit." And I said, "Yes, she is a sweetheart of a lady." I'm going to show you who this is.
Oh my gosh, I can't
see it.
Wait a minute. Oh, is it Mike Walker?
No.
No, I
little
can't
blurry.
see. Yeah.
Is
it's
it
real-
blurry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who is
That
it?
that is Jeff Bates.
Oh, Jeff. Oh, yeah. He
We
tried
had
it.
him on the podcast. He had an album
I
called
love
Me and
Jeff.
Conway. He
Yeah.
loves some Conway Twitty. I mean, good
Oh,
Lord.
yeah.
That sounds a lot like him too.
He
He
sounds
does.
like him.
Very similar.
He does. He came and auditioned.
Oh,
He
did
came
he?
and auditioned.
Wow. Oh, wow.
He did. He did. We considered him strongly. We did. And then he came to the thing at TPAC. He said, oh, "You got the right guy. You got the right guy." I mean, he did. He agreed. And you know who else came? Was Mark Wills. He was auditioning for. Yeah. You remember Mark Wills?
I do.
Yeah. He could sound like him. But anyway, Jeff said, "Y'all got the right guy." He said because Glenn had that really high range where he could do those money notes. And, Jeff was good in a certain era and tone and, within a certain range. And I love Jeff. We've been friends for a long time. I hadn't seen him in a while, but he's precious. I do love him. But he agreed. He said, "You got the right guy. You got the right guy." So,
nice.
But it was.
I'm glad I just thought about that.
I'm glad you did too. He's a sweetheart. He is a sweetheart.
We stayed with hours on here too with him, and just went, he went to town, and he talked about Conway a lot. And I did a music video with him. He was on one of my former band's music videos, and man, he sang us Conway in that little setting we were in. He grabbed acoustic guitar and started singing "Hello, Darling."
Yeah.
So,
well, there's another guy named Mike Walker. That's who I thought. I couldn't see. I didn't. It was,
it didn't focus. It didn't focus
for well. Yeah, it's okay. But there's another guy named Mike Walker, and the first time, my dear friend Mark Capps, he used to work at a big studio here in Nashville until they ended up closing, and now he does independent stuff. But he said there's this guy I just worked on his session, and his name is Mike Walker. He said he's a cross between Conway Twitty and Elvis Presley. He's got both sounds, and he said it's crazy. So Mike, when we were needing a backup for Glenn in case something happened, Mike was going to be our next guy, and he was awesome too. He was just as good a singer, and I hadn't heard him do the early rock and roll stuff, but Glenn sounded so much like Dad in the early rock and roll days. It was weird that he could switch and do all those genres, that Dad would switch throughout his career too. And, but anyway, yeah, I love Jeff. I do. I love him. And he would have done a great job, but I think we found the right Conway. And there's nothing, I've seen his videos too. There's nothing on there that is magical like what we experienced when we would have the full band and him in the suit and when he was really practiced, really polished up for what he was doing. Oh my gosh, it was eerie. It was really eerie.
Oh, let me ask you this, and I'm trying to figure out a way to say this that sounds, because the way he said it, it was couth. Larry, our bass player, I believe it was Larry that said it. Some people ask me the questions, and you've answered some of them without me even having to ask you. But Larry, I think it was wanting to know, and forgive me if I'm asking this wrongly, but we've touched on some shit that makes this seem petty. So, you're now older than your dad was when he passed. So how was that when you were 59 and okay, well, this is when, Dad passed? I mean, you know what I mean? How is it knowing, you've now lived longer that, because people even have asked, speaking of Hank Williams Jr., he's, 2 or 3 times older than his dad ever lived,
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'll tell you a weird story. I was 59 and my husband's sisters live in Missouri. They don't live in Springfield, but they live about 45 minutes from there. And Don and I had gone up to spend some time with them. It was during my, 59th year. And we were going to come back like on Sunday. And this was Friday afternoon late. And they had all these, warning about the weather that was going to be so torrential. John had a session on Monday. So we had to be back for the session. And they were saying that there's going to be flooding, and down in that area, like in the Poplar Bluff area where we would go across the river, sometimes it gets where water's over it and you can't get across. And I said, oh my gosh, do you think we need to go on? Because they were calling for like torrential rains, right? And so Don and I made the decision that we might ought to go on back and at least get on the other side of the river. And so we left. It was on Saturday. That's what it was. And we left earlier than we were expecting to leave the next day. And we were coming back and the rains came that night. It was like 10 o'clock at night. You couldn't even see the front end of the car. I mean, it was so bad. And all of a sudden, John was driving. We hydroplaned and we just start spinning around on the interstate, just spinning. It was a 4-lane highway, but there weren't any other cars, thank God. And then all of a sudden we go backwards, out of control, down a big ditch and up on the other side, and hit a tree, and it like broke my seatbelt loose, and I went up and smacked my head. I think it knocked some sense into me instead of out of me. But anyway, we couldn't move. The car wouldn't go across, back across. So we had to call, we had one of those little life alert things, we pushed the button and got a wrecker to come and find us. They couldn't even find us because we were like down, And I thought about it after it was over. I thought, oh my gosh, I could have been 59 years old and died in Missouri, close to where my dad died, and somehow I survived, but it was just the weirdest thing. But yeah, I think about that a lot. I think I'm way older than my dad now, and I think that's so sad. He missed. I hate that he was a workhorse. He worked so hard and always worked hard to provide for people he loved and even people that he just cared about, but he just took care of everyone. And he didn't get to enjoy the golden years, of saying, now I can relax and enjoy the fruits of my labor, and I hate that. I hate that for him. But in another way, I look at it and I think there's no telling what he could have gone through with somebody that might have, tried to take him down. Who knows? But I thank God also that he is no longer here for damage to be done on him in any way that could have been done. So there's.
You said he used to give to sometimes a family would talk about tough times or something, and then he would get his manager, which was also, I don't know, was that also the bus driver too, or
road manager?
Road manager. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he would tell him to get their information, and he'd just send them a bunch of money.
Yeah, he did, and he said, and I don't want him to know where it came from at all. I just want you to take care of it. And that's the way he was. He did that many times. I'm not kidding. Many times. I remember when we were in Oklahoma City and this guy comes up to our table and he said, Conway, he said, I am so embarrassed to ask you this. He said, my wife's pregnant and I don't have any money to get us home. I'm trying to get us home. And he said, I can't work. We don't have a vehicle. I'm just, I'm on hard times. And he said, can you help? I guess he did have a vehicle. I can't remember. I was a kid, but I remember the story. But anyway, he said, if I could borrow $200 from you just to get home, I promise you I'll pay you back. And Dad said, oh, of course you can, you know. He said, but you don't have to worry about paying me back. He said, no, sir, that's my job as a gentleman. I want to pay you back. And so anyway, Dad gives him $200, and the guy, I think he gave him extra, you know, to help him. And many years later, the guy comes up to Dad. He said, you probably don't remember me. He said, but I came up to you with my pregnant wife, and we needed to borrow money, and you gave us money, and you didn't know us at all. And he said, I want to pay you back with interest. And Dad said, oh, no. Just, you know, the fact that you offered is so sweet and, you know, so kind. And no, you don't need to pay me back. He said, you know, as a man, you need to accept my money. I want to feel like a man again, and please accept this money. And Dad, he got all teary-eyed. He was real emotional, and it touched his heart a lot, you know. But he said, I couldn't take his dignity away. He said, I didn't need the money, but I, you know, couldn't take his dignity from him and not let him pay me back. And he didn't let him pay the interest. He said, no, you just give me the whatever, however much it was, and let's call it a day. And the guy said, thank you. So anyway, but he did that time and time again. Now that was a small amount. I'm talking about, you know, people who had a sick child that had cancer or whatever, and they couldn't afford the treatments, and Dad would say, take care of it, you know. But he never wanted them to know where it came from. He said, if you do it for the glory, you're not doing it for the right reasons. If you do it for the notoriety, it's not right. Then you shouldn't do it at all, because that's not what life's about. You do it because you have that kind of heart to give and to share and to pay it forward, basically. You know, that's our phrase today. But when God gives you a gift and you've been able to do well with that gift, you owe it to people to take, you know, to help them. And that's why he lived his life. He always did. And, you know, that's why I've told you all this. And I tell anybody who will listen to me talk about him, because I'm so proud of him. I'm really proud of those 55 #1 records and all those accolades and things that, you know, he got to do in his life and experience. And, you know, for the millions of fans that kept coming back and showing up night after night, I'm very proud for that. But I'm more proud of Harold Jenkins, the man, because he was one of the most genuine, kind-hearted, tender-hearted, loving, full of love people you could ever meet. I'm not kidding you. And anybody who knew him said the same thing. They were all just like, I'm in the presence of something very special here, because he was that way. He had an effect on you. And people who knew him well, and I'm not talking about after he hit his head, but I'm talking about prior to, and even that part of him was still there. But he just had the kindest soul, you know, sweet spirit. And my parents were two of the kindest, most loving, generous people you'd ever meet. And in different ways, they had different kinds of personalities from each other, but together they were a power couple, you know, they really were. And for us to get to say, these were our parents, we were certainly blessed. And I know everybody feels that way about their own parents, but my dad did something a little different than most people's dad, you know. So for him to
a little different,
but for him to remain so anchored, you know, through all of that, it says a lot for his character, because I've seen him slide off the side, you know. After success happens, that big head gets going, and you see some changes, you know, and it's natural. It's not like they're doing something weird. It's just natural for people to feel self-important, you know, and
ego.
Yeah, it's natural as the day is long. but those who can hold it and not let the ego take over and remain the good tattered down person, that's when you got something unique. And that's what he had. And I was so proud of that.
Well, and y'all have got something unique too, because there's not many Joni Lees and Kathy's and Lisa Marie Presley's, and there's not many people who can say they were the child of a super, not just a super, an icon. I wouldn't even say a superstar, because there's there's not many superstars, but then there's not that even I say a smaller amount of icons in every 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and to be able to like we always say, have a front row seat to that career was amazing. To watch it as it progressed and unfolded, and we were there every step of the way with him.
Not many people could have had a Graceland or a Twitty City and people would have gave two craps about it and would have visited like that. And most, you know what I mean? Most stars couldn't have done that and got away with that.
Do you know that in Tennessee, we were the second most successful tourist attraction next to Opryland? Oh, wow. We were the second. Yeah, at the time. It was the second most successful tourist attraction.
But I know it's getting late, and I want to say it is J. Rob's birthday, and he is being a trooper, staying up this late. It is now his birthday.
Thank you very much.
What are you, 25?
Oh, Lord. 43.
Huh?
43.
43. All right. Well, happy birthday. I'm so glad.
Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to get to spend it with you.
Well, thank you. I know I get talking too much, but I appreciate that. Happy birthday. I'm so
thank you.
Anyway. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this has been awesome. Like this has been
the best. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're so sweet. And you listened to me blab for a long time. And Jeremy, happy birthday.
Thank you so much. It definitely is one.
Well,
thank you.
I'm glad I got to spend it with you.
Great present.
Oh, thank you. And thank you too, Charles. Y'all are so sweet and so kind. I love the whole band. You tell them all I said hi, and the road crew. One of them, I was sitting there playing the machine, and as he was leaving with the probably the last cart going out the door, he said, "Bye, Miss Joni." Said,
that was me and Larry.
Oh, was that y'all? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well,
I am so glad you come up there and introduced yourself to us.
Oh my gosh.
Blessed for that.
Well, I'm glad I did too. It like I said, I'm shy about doing stuff like that, but I'm glad I did it. All right. Well, you guys,
Joni.
All right. We'll talk to you soon and tell everybody
I'm going to talk to you in the next few days.
Yes, ma'am.
Sounds good. All right. Good night.
Bye.
Ah.
See y'all.